the ground now! Do it!
The gun pressed cold against Samuel Thorne's temple, and Officer David Miller's finger trembled on the trigger. I said, "Get on the ground now." But the man in the silk shirt didn't move. He just looked at the officer with eyes that held something Miller couldn't name, not fear, but knowledge. "You're making," Samuel said softly, "the worst mistake of your life." Miller laughed.
What are you doing?
He had no idea the man he was about to arrest was the one person in the state who could destroy him. What happened in the next 12 minutes would shatter careers, expose corruption, and prove that sometimes justice doesn't wear a badge. It wears a silk shirt embroidered with red roses. Before we dive into this incredible story, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. You don't belong here. Those 4 words shattered the Saturday morning silence on Sycamore Lane like a rock through glass. Samuel Thorne had heard them before. Different voices, different cities, different decades, but always the same poison, wrapped in different paper. He stood on the stone pathway leading to his home, a Mediterranean-style mansion with cream walls and terracotta tiles, holding his leather briefcase in one hand and his car keys in the other. The morning sun caught the red roses embroidered on his black silk shirt, making them seem to bloom against the fabric. He'd just returned from an early meeting at the courthouse. Saturday mornings were sacred to him, quiet hours to review cases with eyes, without interruption, to think without the weight of the robe and gavel. He'd pulled into his driveway at 9:47 a.m., parked his Mercedes in the garage, and walked back out to grab his briefcase from the passenger seat. That's when the patrol car pulled up. Officer David Miller stepped out like he owned the street. 38 years old, 15 years on the force, with a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile somewhere around year 3. His hand rested on his belt, not quite on his weapon, but close enough to send a message. "I said you don't belong here." Miller's voice was louder now, carrying across the manicured lawns and perfectly trimmed hedges. "What's your business in this neighborhood?" Samuel turned slowly. He'd learned a long time ago that sudden movements could be misinterpreted or deliberately interpreted as aggression. "Good morning, officer. I live here. This is my home." Miller's eyes narrowed. He looked at Samuel, then at the mansion, then back at Samuel. The math didn't add up in his head, or maybe it did, and that's what bothered him. "You're home. You got ID?" "Of course." Samuel kept his hands visible, moving with deliberate slowness as he reached into his back pocket. "I'm just going to retrieve my wallet." "Keep your hands where I can see them." Miller's hand moved to his gun. Samuel froze. His wallet was halfway out of his pocket, his fingers pinching the leather between thumb and forefinger. "Officer, I'm doing exactly what you asked. You requested identification. I'm getting my identification." "Don't move." Miller stepped closer, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Put your hands up, now." Samuel's jaw tightened, but he complied. He raised his hands slowly, the wallet still pinched between his fingers, visible and unthreatening. "My name is Samuel Thorne. This is 847 Sycamore Lane. I've lived here for 7 years. My wallet contains my driver's license with this address. Would you like to see it?" "I'll tell you what I'd like." Miller was 3 feet away now, close enough that Samuel could smell the coffee on his breath and see the small scar above his left eyebrow. "I'd like to know what you're really doing here, because I patrol this neighborhood twice a week and I've never seen you. Perhaps you patrol at different hours than when I'm typically outside. Perhaps you're lying." The word hung in the air between them like smoke. Samuel took a slow breath. He'd been a lawyer for 23 years, a judge for 8, elevated to the state Supreme Court 3 years ago. He'd presided over cases that set precedent-written opinions that were cited nationwide and mentored dozens of young attorneys. He'd argued before hostile judges, faced down corrupt politicians, and stared down threats that would have broken lesser men. But standing in his own driveway with his hands up and a cop who'd already decided he was guilty, Samuel felt something he hadn't felt in years, the cold certainty that reason might not be enough. "Officer Street," he said carefully, "I'm happy to cooperate, but I need you to understand that I'm complying with your requests. I live here. If you'd like to verify that I can show you my identification, or we can knock on my front door where my wife is likely preparing breakfast, or you can run this address through your system and see that it's registered to me." Miller's radio crackled. A voice asked about his location. He ignored it. "Turn around," Miller said. "Hands on your head, fingers interlaced." Samuel's heart kicked against his ribs. "Officer, this is unnecessary. I haven't committed any crime. I'm standing in my own driveway." "I'm not going to ask again." Miller's hand closed around his gun grip. He didn't draw it, but the threat was clear as a bell. "Turn around. Hands on your head, now." Across the street, Helen Murray paused while watering her roses. She'd lived on Sycamore Lane for 32 years, had watched the neighborhood evolve from old money to new, had welcomed Samuel and his wife Grace with a basket of homemade muffins 7 years ago. She saw the patrol car. She saw Samuel's hands in the air. She saw Officer Miller, whose daughter was in her book club, whose wife volunteered at the same charity she did. She turned off her hose and went inside. 3 doors down, Robert Chen was loading golf clubs into his trunk. He glanced over, saw the confrontation, and quickly looked away. He had a tea time at 10. He didn't want to get involved. He slammed his trunk and drove off. But in the house, directly across from Samuel's, Sarah Martinez pressed record on her phone. She was 26, a freelance journalist who'd moved to Sycamore Lane 6 months ago, renting the guest house behind the Peterson property. She'd interviewed Samuel once for a piece on judicial reform. She knew who he was. And she knew this was wrong. Through her screen, she watched Samuel slowly turn around. She watched him place his hands on his head. Fingers interlaced his briefcase, falling to the ground with a soft thud. She watched Officer Miller approach from behind his hand, still on his gun. "Officer." Samuel's voice was steady, but Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders. "I'm complying. There's no need for force. My identification is in my back right pocket. My wallet—" "Shut up!" Miller grabbed Samuel's wrist and yanked it down, twisting it behind his back. "You talk when I tell you to talk." Pain shot through Samuel's shoulder. The officer was using more force than necessary, torquing his arm at an angle that made his rotator cuff scream. "You're hurting me. There's no reason." Miller grabbed Samuel's other wrist and slammed it behind his back, forcing both arms together. "I said shut up. You think you can just roll up to a neighborhood like this, probably casing houses, looking for what you can steal?" "I'm not a thief." Samuel's voice sharpened despite the pain. "I'm a homeowner. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a citizen. And you're violating my Fourth Amendment rights." The words came out before he could stop them, the lawyer in him unable to stay silent in the face of injustice. And they were the wrong words. Miller's grip tightened. "Oh, we got a lawyer, do we? You know your rights." He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Samuel could hear. "Let me tell you something, counselor. Your rights are what I say they are. Right here, right now, I'm the law. You understand me?" Samuel said nothing. His mind was racing through options, through precedents, through the statistical probability of this situation escalating versus de-escalating. He'd studied enough cases, read enough reports, seen enough evidence to know that talking back to a cop who'd already decided you were guilty could turn dangerous fast. But silence could be dangerous too. "I asked you a question." Miller's hand moved to his gun again. This time he drew it. The sound of metal sliding against leather made Samuel's blood run cold. "Do you understand me?" Sarah's hands shook as she held up her phone. She'd covered protests, interviewed survivors of police brutality, written articles about systemic racism in law enforcement. But watching it happen in real time on her quiet street to a man she knew and respected made it visceral in a way that research never could. She kept recording. "Yes?" Samuel said quietly. "I understand." "Good." Miller holstered his gun but kept Samuel's arms wrenched behind his back. "Now we're going to walk over to my patrol car and you're going to get in and we're going to have a conversation at the station. You got a problem with that?" Samuel's mind calculated the angles. If he resisted, Miller had justification for force. If he complied, he'd be arrested without cause, but at least he'd be alive. At the station, there would be cameras, witnesses, other officers. Chief Brody knew him. They'd worked together on the task force for police reform last year. This was a misunderstanding that could be cleared up. It had to be. "No," Samuel said. "I don't have a problem with that." "Smart man?" Miller pushed him forward, still gripping both wrists. "Move." They took 3 steps toward the patrol car when the front door of 847 Sycamore Lane swung open. Grace Thorne stood in the doorway, wearing a yellow sundress and an apron dusted with flour. She was 51 years old, a pediatric surgeon, with hands that could repair an infant's heart and a voice that could calm the most terrified parent. But right now, her voice was sharp as a scalpel. "David Miller, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Miller stopped. He knew Grace not well, but enough to recognize her from charity events and neighborhood meetings. His grip on Samuel loosened slightly. "Mrs. Thorne, I'm responding to a suspicious person report." "Suspicious person?" Grace's laugh was bitter. "That suspicious person is my husband. That's Samuel Thorne. He lives here. He's lived here for 7 years. You've seen him before." "Ma'am, I need you to step back inside." "I will not step back inside while you assault my husband on our property." Grace descended the front steps, her flour-dusted hands clenched into fists. Let him go, right now. Miller's face flushed red. He was losing control of the situation, and he knew it. Witnesses were bad. Witnesses who knew the suspect were worse. Witnesses who knew the suspect and could vouch for him made his entire approach look like what it was profiling. Ma'am, I'm warning you. And I'm warning you. Grace pulled out her phone. I'm calling our attorney, and then I'm calling Channel 7, and then I'm calling every person I know who has ever donated to the Police Benevolent Fund, which includes me, and I'm going to tell them exactly what I'm watching right now. Samuel felt Miller's grip tighten again, felt the anger radiating off the officer like heat. This was the moment. This was where it could all go sideways. An angry cop, a defiant wife, a black man caught between them. Samuel had seen this movie before, and it never ended well. Grace, he said quietly, it's okay. I'll go with him. Call Attorney Chen. Tell him what happened. I'll be fine. You won't be fine, Grace's voice cracked. This is insane. You haven't done anything wrong. I know. Samuel turned his head as much as Miller's grip would allow, making eye contact with his wife. But we fight this the right way. Call Chen. I'll be at the precinct. I love you. Grace's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. She understood. After 25 years of marriage, after raising 2 sons in a country that saw them as threats, before it saw them as children, and after countless conversations about how to survive encounters with police, she understood. Sometimes survival meant submission. Miller shoved Samuel toward the patrol car. In the back, now, adds. Samuel ducked his head and slid into the back seat. The door slammed shut with a metallic clang that sounded like a cell door closing. Through the window, he watched Grace standing in their driveway, phone pressed to her ear, tears streaming down her face. He watched Helen Murray peeking through her curtains before yanking them shut. He watched cars drive by their occupants, carefully looking away. And he watched Sarah Martinez's phone held high, still recording. Miller got in the driver's seat and pulled away from the curb. He didn't turn on his lights or siren. This wasn't an emergency. This was a lesson. You made a mistake back there, Miller said, glancing at Samuel in the rearview mirror. You should have just shown me your ID when I asked. Would have saved us all this trouble. Samuel stared out the window, watching his neighborhood slide by. The park where he'd taught his sons to ride bikes. The corner store where he bought his morning paper. The community center where he'd given a talk on civic responsibility just last month. I did try to show you my ID, Samuel said quietly. You told me not to move. Miller's jaw clenched. You getting smart with me? No, officer. I'm stating facts. Facts? Miller laughed. Let me tell you a fact. Fact is, you don't look like you belong in that neighborhood. Fact is, I got a call about a suspicious person matching your description. Fact is, you got an attitude problem. Those are the facts that matter. Samuel said nothing. There was no point. Miller had constructed his own reality, and no amount of truth would penetrate it. They drove in silence for several minutes before Miller spoke again. You know what your problem is? People like you. You think you're better than everybody else. You get some money, buy a house in a nice neighborhood, and suddenly you forget where you came from. You forget that there are rules. What rules? Samuel couldn't help himself. The rules that say I can't live in a certain neighborhood. The rules that say I'm suspicious for standing in my own driveway. Those rules. Miller's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Watch yourself. Or what? The words came out before Samuel could stop them. 23 years of swallowing injustice, of being polite in the face of prejudice, of playing by rules that were never designed to protect him, it all came rushing up like bile. You'll arrest me. You already did that. You'll rough me up. Already did that too. What exactly do I have to lose at this point? Miller pulled the car over. They were on a side street now, empty except for a few parked cars and a dumpster behind a closed restaurant. He turned around in his seat, his face twisted with rage. You want to know what you have to lose? Miller's voice was soft now, dangerous. Everything. Your house, your career, your freedom, your life. You think you're special. You think your fancy shirt and your big house make you different. Out here, you're just another... He stopped himself, but the word hung in the air anyway, invisible but present like smoke. Samuel met his eyes. Say it. Go ahead. We both know what you were going to say. Miller's hand dropped to his gun again. Step out of the car. Why, step out of the car now. Samuel's heart hammered in his chest. This was it. This was the moment he'd read about in case files seen in video evidence heard about in tearful testimonies. The moment when a traffic stop became a tragedy. The moment when resisting became an excuse. The moment when I feared for my life became justification for murder. He thought of Grace probably on the phone with their attorney right now. He thought of his sons, Marcus in law school, David in medical school, who he'd raised to believe that education and success could protect them. He thought of his mother, who'd marched in Selma, who'd told him the world was changing, that things were getting better. He thought of the gun on Miller's hip. "I'm not getting out of the car," Samuel said. "You arrested me without cause. You pulled me over without reason. Whatever you're planning to do it with witnesses. Do it on camera. Do it somewhere people can see." Miller stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed a cold, ugly sound. "You think you're smart. You think you got it all figured out." He turned back around and started the car. "Fine. We'll do this at the station. See how smart you feel then." They drove the rest of the way in silence. The precinct was a squat concrete building on the edge of downtown, surrounded by parking lots and chain-link fencing. Miller pulled into the garage and parked in a spot marked "Officer Parking Only." He got out and opened Samuel's door. "Let's go." Samuel stepped out, his hands still cuffed behind his back. Miller grabbed his elbow and steered him toward the building entrance through a heavy metal door that required a key card to open. Inside, the fluorescent lights were harsh and bright. The hallway smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. Miller marched Samuel past a break room where two officers looked up from their conversation past a bulletin board covered with wanted posters and safety notices past closed doors with frosted glass windows. They stopped at a desk where a young officer couldn't be more than 25, with red hair and freckles, was typing on a computer. His nameplate read Officer Brooks. "Hey Miller," Brooks said without looking up. "Who you got?" "Suspicious person, possible B&E suspect. Found him casing a house on Sycamore Lane." Samuel's eyes widened. "That's a lie. I was standing in my own driveway." "Shut it." Miller pushed him forward. "Book him. Trespassing, resisting arrest, and let's add disorderly conduct while we're at it." Brooks finally looked up. His eyes went from Miller to Samuel, taking in the silk shirt, the expensive watch, the dignified bearing, despite the handcuffs. Something flickered in his expression. Doubt, maybe, or concern. "Did you get a statement from the property owner?" Brooks asked. "Don't need one. I saw what I saw." "But if he says it's his house..." "It's not his house." Miller's voice hardened. "Just book him, Brooks, or do I need to get Chief Brody down here to explain how this works?" Brooks hesitated, then started typing. "Name? Samuel Thorne." Samuel spelled it out, his voice level despite the rage burning in his chest. "Thorne. Date of birth, March 15th, 1974. Address, 847 Sycamore Lane." Brooks typed, then frowned at his screen. "It says here that property is registered to a Samuel and Grace Thorne." "Yeah, that's what he's claiming," Miller said quickly. "Probably identity theft. Run him for warrants." Brooks typed some more. The seconds stretched out. Samuel could hear his own heartbeat, could feel sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. This was the moment. When Brooks pulled up his record, he'd see everything, the law degree, the appointments, the cases. He'd see Justice Samuel Thorne, State Supreme Court. Brooks's eyes widened. Miller, I think you should see this." Or what?" Miller leaned over the computer screen. Samuel watched his face go from annoyed to confused to pale white in about 3 seconds. "This can't be right," Miller muttered. "Run it again." "I did, twice." Brooks looked up at Samuel with something like horror. "Sir, are you Justice Thorne?" Samuel said nothing. He just looked at Miller, who was staring at the computer screen like it might be lying, like reality itself might be playing a trick on him. "Take off his cuffs," Brooks said. "What? No, Take off his cuffs right now, or I'm calling the chief." Brooks was on his feet now, moving around the desk. "Sir, I am so sorry. This is Jesus Christ Miller. What did you do?" Miller's hands shook as he pulled out his key and unlocked the handcuffs. They fell away with a metallic click. Samuel rubbed his wrists, which were red and raw from the metal. "There's been a misunderstanding," Miller said, his voice strangled. "I didn't know. I mean, he didn't identify himself." "You didn't give me the chance," Samuel said quietly. "You ordered me to put my hands up before I could get my wallet out. You decided who I was before I could tell you." Brooks looked like he might throw up. "Justice Thorne, we need to call someone. The chief, or..." "Yes," Samuel said. "Call Chief Brody. I'd like to have a conversation with him." Miller backed away, his face ashen. He knew what this meant. He knew his career was over. He knew that he'd just assaulted one of the most powerful men in the state justice system on video with witnesses and no possible justification. He also knew that Chief Frank Brody, his mentor for the last 15 years, was probably going to try to make this go away. And Samuel knew it too. "Don't bother," a voice said from down the hall. "I'm already here." Chief Frank Brody walked toward them, his footsteps echoing on the linoleum. He was 58, with iron gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He'd been chief for 12 years, survived 3 mayors, 4 scandals, and countless calls for reform. He looked at Miller, he looked at Samuel, he smiled. "Justice Thorne," Brody said, extending his hand. "What a surprise. What brings you to our precinct on a Saturday morning?" Samuel didn't take his hand. "Your officer arrested me in my own driveway, without cause, used excessive force, made false statements, and violated multiple constitutional rights. That's what brings me here." Brody's smile didn't waver. "I'm sure there's been some confusion. Miller, why don't you step into my office, Justice Thorne, if you'll give us just a moment?" "No." Samuel's voice cut through the hallway like a blade. "No moments, no confusion, no sweeping this under the rug. Your officer committed multiple crimes against me this morning, and I want it on record, now." Brody's smile finally faded. "Justice Thorne, I understand you're upset, but let's be reasonable. These things happen. Mistakes get made. I'm sure we can work something out." "Work something out." Samuel stepped forward. "You want to work something out. Fine, here's what we're going to work out. Officer Miller is going to write a complete statement of what happened this morning. You're going to pull all relevant camera footage from the patrol car from this building, from every available source. You're going to preserve all evidence, and then you're going to refer this to Internal Affairs and the District Attorney's Office for prosecution." Brody's face hardened. "You're overreacting." "Am I?" Samuel's voice rose. "Your officer pulled a gun on me, cuffed me, humiliated me in front of my neighbors, arrested me without cause. And you want to tell me I'm overreacting?" "I want to tell you," Brody said slowly, "that you're a smart man, smart enough to know that going to war over this helps nobody. You file a complaint, it becomes public. Media gets involved, your name gets dragged through the mud along with ours. People start asking questions about why you were really in that neighborhood, what you were really doing. You know how these things go." The threat was clear as crystal. "Play along or we'll destroy you." Samuel had seen this before too. He'd presided over cases where police closed ranks, where evidence disappeared, where witnesses changed their stories. He'd written scathing opinions condemning it, calling for reform, demanding accountability. Now he was on the other side. "You're making a mistake," Samuel said softly. "A big one." Brody shrugged. "Maybe, but I've been making mistakes for 30 years, and I'm still here. Are you sure you want to make this your fight?" Samuel reached into his pocket slowly, carefully, and pulled out his phone. He'd been smart enough to hit record before Miller forced him into the car. Everything was there. Every word. Every threat. "Chief Brody," Samuel said, "I'm invoking my rights under Title 42, Section 1983 of the U.S. Code. I'm making a formal complaint of civil rights violations against Officer Miller and this department. I'm also notifying you that I'll be contacting the Attorney General's office, the FBI Civil Rights Division, and every media outlet in this state. And if you try to stop me, I'll add obstruction of justice to the charges." Brody's face went from hard to murderous. "You self-righteous son of a—" "Careful," Samuel's voice was ice. "Threatening a sitting judge is a felony. Want to add that to your morning?" They stared at each other. 2 men. 2 different versions of justice. One who believed in the law, one who believed he was above it. Brooks broke the silence. "Chief, maybe we should—" "Shut up, Brooks." Brody didn't take his eyes off Samuel. "You want to burn everything down over this? Fine. Do it. But remember, you live in this state. Your family lives in this state. You really want to start a war, you might not win." Samuel smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who'd spent his entire life fighting and knew exactly what he was getting into. "Chief," he said, "I've been fighting this war since I was 6 years old. The only difference is now I have the weapons to win it." He turned and walked toward the exit. Behind him, he heard Brody cursing, heard Miller starting to panic, heard Brooks trying to calm everyone down. He didn't care. He pushed through the doors into the bright Saturday morning sunshine, pulled out his phone, and made 3 calls. First to his wife. "Grace, I'm out. I'm okay. I love you." Second to his attorney. "Chen, we need to talk. Now." Third to Deputy Attorney General Eleanor Vance, who he'd worked with on criminal justice reform and who he trusted more than almost anyone in the state justice system. "Eleanor," he said when she answered, "it's Samuel Thorne. I need to report multiple civil rights violations by the Westbrook Police Department, and I need you to move fast because they're going to try to cover it up." "Samuel? What happened? Are you okay?" He looked back at the precinct building, at the concrete and chain link and the darkness inside. "No, Hal," he said honestly. "I'm not okay, but I'm alive. and I'm going to make sure what happened to me this morning never happens to anyone else again." "Tell me everything," Eleanor said. So he did, and 12 minutes after Officer David Miller pulled his gun on Samuel Thorne, the wheels of justice, real justice, began to turn. Eleanor Vance was in her kitchen making pancakes for her daughter when Samuel's call came through. She listened for 30 seconds, turned off the stove, and told her husband she had to go. By the time Samuel finished explaining what happened, she was already in her car heading toward the federal building downtown. "Don't talk to anyone else," Eleanor said. "Not the media, not other officers, nobody. I'm calling the FBI field office right now. Where are you? Standing outside the precinct. I'm going home. No, come to my office. Bring Grace. Bring your attorney. We're doing this right, which means we're doing it fast before they have time to destroy evidence." Samuel hung up and called Grace again. "Change of plans. Meet me at the federal building. Bring the video if you got one from the neighbor." "Sarah already sent it to me. Samuel, this is all over the neighborhood chat. People saw everything. Helen Murray is saying she didn't see anything. Robert Chen left before it happened. But Sarah Samuel, she got everything on video. The gun, the threats, everything." Samuel closed his eyes and breathed. One brave person, that's all it took sometimes. One person willing to stand up when everyone else looked away. "Tell Sarah I want to talk to her, and Grace bring my robe." "Your robe, why?" "Because I'm going to remind everyone who I am." He drove home in his Mercedes, hands still shaking slightly on the wheel. His wrists ached where the cuffs had cut into them. His shoulder throbbed where Miller had wrenched his arm. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the rage burning in his chest. Not hot rage, cold rage. The kind that didn't explode. The kind that calculated and planned and waited for exactly the right moment to strike. Grace was waiting in the driveway when he pulled up. She ran to him and wrapped her arms around him so tight he could barely breathe. "I thought, God, Samuel, I know." He held her. "I know, but I'm okay. We're okay." "This isn't okay. None of this is okay." "You're right, so we're going to fix it." Sarah Martinez was standing on her porch across the street, phone in hand. Samuel waved her over. She crossed the street at a jog, her expression anxious and determined in equal measure. "Justice Thorne, I got everything. The whole thing. I sent it to Mrs. Thorne, and I backed it up on 3 different cloud services. I can testify. I want to testify." Samuel looked at this young woman who could have stayed inside, could have looked away, could have deleted the video to avoid trouble. Why? Why what? Why did you record it? Why are you willing to testify? You could make your life a lot easier by staying out of this. Sarah's jaw set. "My brother was killed by police in Phoenix 3 years ago. Traffic stop. They said he reached for something. He was reaching for his inhaler. He had asthma." Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. "I couldn't save Miguel. But maybe I can help you get justice. Maybe that means something." Samuel felt his throat tighten. "It means everything. Thank you." Inside the house, he changed into his judicial robes, the formal black robe he wore when presiding over the state Supreme Court. Grace watched him button it up and understood immediately. "You're going to war. I'm going to court. There's a difference." "Is there?" Samuel adjusted his collar and looked at himself in the mirror. The robe transformed him. Not because it gave him power, he already had that, but because it reminded everyone else that the man Officer Miller had brutalized wasn't just a citizen. He was a symbol, an institution, a representation of the law itself. "When they see me in this robe," Samuel said, "they'll understand what Miller really did. He didn't just violate my rights. He attacked the justice system itself, and that's something they can't sweep away." At the federal building, Eleanor Vance had assembled a team faster than Samuel thought possible. 2 FBI agents from the Civil Rights Division stood in her office along with a federal prosecutor named James Walsh, who Samuel had worked with on several cases. Attorney Chen arrived minutes after Samuel and Grace, carrying a briefcase stuffed with legal documents. Sarah came too, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Eleanor took one look at Samuel in his judicial robes and nodded with approval. "Smart, very smart. Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Justice Samuel Thorne of the State Supreme Court, who this morning was arrested, assaulted, and threatened by officers of the Westbrook Police Department." The FBI agents, one was a woman named Agent Patricia Morrison, the other a man named Agent Derek Hayes, exchanged glances. Hayes spoke first. "Justice Thorne, I'm going to be direct. This is a serious allegation. If what you're saying is true, we're talking about multiple federal violations. But we need evidence. We need witnesses. We need... Here." Sarah thrust her phone forward. "I recorded the whole thing. You can see the gun. You can hear the threats. It's all there. Agent Morrison took the phone and watched. Her expression went from professional neutrality to barely contained anger in about 60 seconds. Jesus Christ, he pulled his weapon on you for standing in your own driveway. That's correct? And he arrested you without probable cause. That's correct? And Chief Brody tried to cover it up. He offered to work something out if I didn't file a complaint. When I refused, he threatened me and my family. Morrison handed the phone to Hayes, who watched the video twice. This is prosecutable, federal prosecution. We can have warrants issued for Miller and Brody within hours. No, Samuel said. Everyone turned to look at him. No, Eleanor frowned. Samuel, what are you talking about? If you arrest them now, they'll claim they were following procedure. They'll say it was a misunderstanding. They'll get lawyers who'll drag this out for years, and in the end, maybe Miller gets probation and Brody gets early retirement with full pension. That's not justice. Then what do you want? Walsh asked. Samuel looked at each person in the room. I want to know how deep the corruption goes. I want to know how many other people this has happened to. I want to know if there's a pattern, a practice, a culture of abuse. And then I want to dismantle the entire system that allowed this to happen. Chen leaned back in his chair. You want to go after the whole department. I want to go after everyone who enabled this, everyone who participated, everyone who looked the other way. Miller didn't become a racist cop overnight. Brody didn't learn to cover up abuse yesterday. This has been happening for years, and everyone knew and nobody stopped it. Morrison pulled out a laptop. If we're going deep, we need more evidence. We need witnesses. We need people willing to talk. I can help with that, Sarah said. I'm a journalist. I've been researching police misconduct for 3 years. I have contact sources, people who filed complaints that went nowhere. If you give me protection and immunity for my sources, I can deliver witnesses. Hayes nodded. Done. What else do we need? We need someone inside the department, Eleanor said. Someone who's seen the corruption but has been afraid to speak out. Someone with access to files, emails, internal communications. Grace spoke for the first time. What about Brooks? The young officer at the station. He looked horrified when he realized what happened. Maybe he'd cooperate. Samuel considered it. Brooks was young, knew probably still idealistic. He'd seen Miller's reaction. He'd watched Brody try to cover it up. If they could get to him before Brody did, before the threat started, before fear took hold maybe. Agent Morrison, can you bring Brooks in for questioning? We can do better than that. We can offer him witness protection and immunity in exchange for cooperation. If he's smart, he'll take it. Do it today, before Brody realizes what's happening. For the next 2 hours, they planned. Eleanor coordinated with the FBI. Walsh prepared warrant applications. Chen drafted civil complaints. Sarah made phone calls to every person she'd ever interviewed about police misconduct in Westbrook, and Samuel put on his judge's hat and started thinking strategically. We need to control the narrative, he said. If this hits the news before we're ready, Brody will spin it. He'll say I was belligerent, that I refused to comply, that Miller had reasonable suspicion. We need to get ahead of it. Agreed, Eleanor said. But how? How the moment we start arresting people, the media will swarm. Samuel pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for. Maria Vance, no relation to Eleanor, was an investigative reporter for the state's largest newspaper. She'd won a Pulitzer for exposing corruption in the state legislature. She was tough fare, and she didn't back down. He called her. She answered on the second ring. Maria, it's Samuel Thorne. I have a story for you, exclusive, but you have to move fast, and you have to get it right. 20 minutes later, Maria was in the federal building with a recorder, a notepad, and fire in her eyes. Samuel told her everything. She listened without interrupting, taking notes in shorthand, her expression growing darker with each detail. This is huge, she said when he finished. This isn't just bad policing. This is systematic civil rights violations at the highest levels. But Samuel, and I'm saying this as your friend, are you sure you want to do this? They're going to come after you, your reputation, your family, your career. They'll dig up everything, every case you ever presided over, every decision you ever made, every mistake you ever committed. They'll try to destroy you. Let them try. I'm not backing down. Maria smiled. It was a grim smile, but genuine. Good, because I'm going to need you on record. I'm going to need depositions, documents, everything. And I'm going to need that video. Sarah handed over her phone. Make sure everyone sees it. Make sure they can't pretend it didn't happen. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, Maria's article was online. The headline read, State Supreme Court Justice Arrested at Gunpoint in Own Driveway, Exclusive Video Shows Officer Pulling Weapon Without Cause. The video was embedded in the article. Within an hour, it had 10,000 views. Within 2 hours, 50,000. By evening, it was national news. Samuel's phone exploded with calls. Reporters, colleagues from the court, old law school friends, civil rights organizations. Everyone wanted a statement, an interview, a comment. He ignored them all except one. His son Marcus called from law school. "Dad, I just saw the video. Are you okay? Do you need me to come home?" "I'm fine, son. Stay in school." How can I stay in school when my father was almost killed by a cop? Samuel heard the fear and rage in his son's voice and felt his heart break a little. This was the legacy he'd tried so hard to shield his children from the knowledge that no amount of success, no amount of education, no amount of dignity could fully protect them from prejudice. "Marcus, listen to me. You stay in school because that's how we win. We don't win by running. We don't win by hiding. We win by being so good, so prepared, so undeniable that they can't ignore us. You understand?" "I understand, but Dad, I'm scared." "Me too, son, me too." His other son, David, called 10 minutes later from medical school with the same fear, the same rage, the same question. Samuel gave him the same answer. Then he sat down with Grace in Eleanor's office and let himself shake for 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes to be human, to be afraid to acknowledge that he'd come very close to becoming another statistic. Then he stood up and got back to work. By 6 p.m., Agent Morrison returned with news. "We got Brooks. He's cooperating. And Samuel, it's worse than we thought. Miller has 17 excessive force complaints over the last 5 years. 17. And every single one was dismissed by Chief Brody without investigation. We're talking about a pattern of abuse that goes back years." "Names," Samuel said. "I want the names of every person who filed a complaint." "Already compiling them. Most are black or Latino. Most involve traffic stops or suspicious person calls. Most involve Miller or 3 other officers who work under Brody's direct supervision. This isn't one bad cop. This is a bad department." Chen looked up from his laptop. "I'm seeing something else. Financial irregularities, overtime padding, equipment purchases that don't match inventory. Someone's been stealing from the department for years, and I'm betting it's Brody." "Follow the money," Samuel said. "Financial crimes are easier to prove than civil rights violations. If we can get Brody on corruption charges, the civil rights cases become layup shots." Walsh nodded. "I'll get subpoenas for financial records, bank accounts, credit cards, property records, everything. If Brody's dirty, we'll find it." By 8 p.m., the FBI had executed search warrants at the police department and at Brody's home. Samuel watched the news coverage from Eleanor's office. He saw officers carrying boxes of documents out of the precinct. He saw Brody standing on his front lawn, red-faced and screaming at agents. He saw Miller being led out of the building in handcuffs. "That was fast," Grace said. "Has to be," Morrison replied. "Give them time and they'll destroy evidence coordinate stories lawyer up. We hit them hard and fast before they know what's happening." Samuel's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered anyway. "Justice Thorne." The voice was male, young, nervous. "This is Officer Jake Peters. I worked at Westbrook PD. I heard what happened to you. I want to help." "Go on." "Miller bragged about it in the locker room today. He said he taught some rich black guy a lesson. Said the guy thought he was better than everyone else, but learned real quick who was boss." Other officers laughed. "I didn't. I couldn't. And then I saw the video online and realized it was you. Justice Thorne. I've been watching this stuff happen for 2 years. Miller, Brody, 3 other guys. They're like a gang inside the department. They protect each other. They cover for each other. And if you speak up, they make your life hell." "Why are you speaking up now?" Silence. "Then, because I became a cop to help people, not to hurt them, and I'm tired of being ashamed to wear this badge." "Officer Peters, I'm going to give you to someone from the FBI. Tell them everything you know, names, dates, incidents, everything. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir. Thank you for giving me the chance." Samuel handed the phone to Agent Hayes, who took Peters' information and promised protection. As he hung up, Morrison's phone rang. She listened, said understood, and looked at Samuel. "That was the field office. We just got 3 more officers calling in to cooperate. This is snowballing." Eleanor smiled. "Good cops hate bad cops more than anyone. They've been waiting for someone to give them permission to speak up. You just did." By 10 p.m., the FBI had 5 cooperating officers, dozens of witnesses who'd filed complaints, and enough evidence to charge Miller, Brody, and 3 other officers with multiple federal crimes. The state attorney general, Eleanor's boss, called Samuel personally to apologize and promise a full investigation. Samuel went home at midnight. Grace had made soup, but neither of them could eat. They sat at their kitchen table, the same table where they'd had breakfast that morning a lifetime ago. "What happens now?" Grace asked. "Now we wait. The FBI builds their case. The prosecutors prepare for trial, and I go back to work like nothing happened." "How can you go back to work like nothing happened?" "Because if I don't, they win. If I hide, if I let this break me, then Miller accomplished exactly what he wanted. He wanted to put me in my place, to remind me that no matter who I am, no matter what I've achieved, I'm still just..." He couldn't finish the sentence. Grace reached across the table and took his hand. "You're still Samuel Thorne. You're still the man I married. You're still the father our sons adore. You're still a justice on the state Supreme Court. And tomorrow you're going to walk back into that courthouse with your head high and remind everyone of that." Samuel squeezed her hand. "What if it's not enough? What if we go through all this and nothing changes? What if Miller gets a slap on the wrist and Brody retires and everything goes back to the way it was? Then we fight harder. We fight longer. We fight until it does change. That's what we've always done. That's what we'll keep doing." They went to bed, but neither slept much. Samuel kept replaying the moment when Miller pressed the gun to his head, the cold certainty that he might die, the horrible calculation of whether to comply or resist. He'd spent his whole career studying the law, teaching the law, enforcing the law. And in that moment, the law had meant nothing. His phone buzzed at 2 a.m., a text from an unknown number. "You made a big mistake. You should have kept your mouth shut. Watch your back." Samuel showed it to Grace. She called Agent Morrison immediately. Morrison traced the number to a burner phone purchased 3 hours earlier at a convenience store near Brody's house. They couldn't prove it was Brody, but they didn't have to. The threat was clear. "We're putting protection on your house," Morrison said. "Unmarked car, armed agents 24/7 until this is over." "That's not necessary." "It's not optional. Justice Thorne, you just declared war on a corrupt police department. Some of those officers are desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. I'm not taking chances." So Samuel and Grace went to sleep with FBI agents parked outside their house in the neighborhood where they were supposed to be safe in the house they were supposed to belong to. Sunday morning came too soon. Samuel got up, showered, put on a suit, and prepared to face the world. The story had exploded overnight. Every major news outlet covered it. Cable news ran the video on loop. Social media lit up with outrage. Hashtags trended. Politicians issued statements. And through it all, Samuel's phone kept ringing. He ignored most of it. But when Attorney General Richard Howell called, he answered. "Samuel, I owe you an apology. This should never have happened. It's unconscionable, it's illegal, and it reflects poorly on every law enforcement officer in this state." "Thank you, Richard. I appreciate that. But apologies aren't enough. I want reform, real reform. Body cameras on every officer's mandatory reporting of excessive force complaints, independent oversight boards, automatic federal review of police shootings, all of it." "You'll have my full support. I'm drafting legislation today. We'll have it introduced in the state Senate by Friday." "Good. Because if we don't fix this, I'll use every tool at my disposal, judicial opinions, public statements, media interviews, to make sure everyone knows exactly how broken the system is." "I wouldn't expect anything less. Samuel, for what it's worth, I'm proud of how you're handling this. A lot of people would have taken the settlement and stayed quiet. You're standing up. That takes courage." Samuel hung up and looked at Grace. "He's proud of my courage. Like I had a choice. Like staying quiet was ever an option. It's always an option. You chose to fight. That is courage." Sarah Martinez called at 9. "Justice Thorne, I just got off the phone with 6 more people who want to go on record about abuse by Westbrook PD. 3 have videos. 2 have medical records from injuries. 1 has emails from Chief Brody explicitly ordering officers to drop complaints. This is bigger than we thought. This is going to bring down the whole department." "Then we make sure it does. Sarah, I want you to write the definitive account of this. Not just what happened to me. What happened to everyone. Make sure their stories are told. Make sure they're heard." "I will. And Justice Thorne, thank you. Thank you for not staying quiet. Thank you for fighting." At 11 a.m., Samuel got a call from Brooks, the young officer who'd discovered who he was at the precinct. His voice shook. "Justice Thorne, I need to tell you something. After you left yesterday, Chief Brody pulled me into his office. He told me to delete the booking record. He told me to say you were never there. He threatened to fire me if I didn't comply." "What did you do?" "I said yes, but I didn't delete anything. I copied everything, the booking record, the video from the precinct cameras, Miller's initial report, and I sent it to the FBI. Then I resigned. I'm done. I can't work for people like that." Samuel felt a surge of respect for this kid who'd thrown away his career to do the right thing. "Officer Brooks?" "Just Brooks now. I'm not an officer anymore." Brooks, then, what you did took guts. You're going to be okay. I promise you that. I don't know about okay, but I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. That's something. By Sunday afternoon, the dominoes were falling faster than Samuel could count. 3 more officers resigned. 2 were suspended. Miller and Brody were formally charged with federal civil rights violations, assault, false arrest, and conspiracy. The mayor held a press conference promising a complete overhaul of the police department, and Samuel received calls from 17 people, 17 who'd been abused by Miller over the years and wanted justice. He sat in his study, surrounded by legal pads covered in notes, building the case in his mind. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about Anthony Marshall beaten during a traffic stop. This was about Carmen Rodriguez sexually harassed during a domestic violence call. This was about Marquez Johnson, no relation to his son, who'd been arrested for walking while black and spent 3 days in jail before charges were dropped. This was about every person who'd been brutalized, humiliated, and silenced by officers who thought the badge gave them immunity. Grace brought him coffee at 4 p.m. You need to eat something. I will. Just let me finish these notes. Samuel. She put the coffee down and took the legal pad out of his hands. You need to take care of yourself. You can't help anyone if you collapse. I keep thinking about all the people who went through what I went through and didn't have the power to fight back. All the people who filed complaints that were dismissed. All the people who were told to keep quiet. Grace. How many people suffered because we didn't stop this sooner? You can't blame yourself for not stopping something you didn't know about. But I should have known. I'm a judge. I see these cases. I read these reports. I should have seen the pattern. I should have asked more questions. I should have... Stop. Grace's voice was firm. You are one man. You can't fix everything. But you can fix this. So finish your coffee, eat some food, and get back to work. Because those 17 people are counting on you. Brooks is counting on you. Every good cop who's tired of being lumped in with the bad ones is counting on you. Don't let them down. Samuel picked up his coffee and drank. She was right. Self-recrimination was a luxury he couldn't afford right now. By Monday morning, the FBI had executed 14 search warrants, interviewed 47 witnesses, and seized enough evidence to fill a conference room. Agent Morrison gave Samuel an update over the phone. We found it. The smoking gun. Brody has been running a protection racket for years. Local businesses pay him for extra security, which really means his officers look the other way when they violate codes or regulations. We've got bank records showing deposits from a dozen businesses all routed through shell companies. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. How did nobody notice? They noticed. 2 city council members tried to investigate 4 years ago. Brody threatened them. One withdrew his complaint. The other lost his re-election bid after Brody leaked information about an extramarital affair to the press. So he's been untouchable. Was untouchable. Past tense. As of this morning, he's in federal custody and he's not getting out. The judge denied bail, said he's a flight risk and a danger to witnesses. Samuel felt something loosen in his chest. What about Miller? Also in custody, also denied bail. And Samuel, he's talking. He's trying to cut a deal. He's claiming Brody ordered him to target certain neighborhoods, certain people. He's saying he was just following orders. The Nuremberg defense. It didn't work in 1945 and it won't work now. Agreed. But it gives us leverage. If Miller's willing to flip on Brody and the other officers involved, we can build an even stronger case. Samuel thought about it. Part of him wanted to see Miller burn. Wanted him to spend decades in prison, thinking about the moment he pulled that gun. But the strategic part of his brain, the part that had spent years navigating complex legal systems, knew that flipping Miller could take down the entire corrupt network. Let him talk, Samuel said. Get everything he knows. Names, dates, incidents, all of it. Then prosecute him anyway. Just maybe recommend a lighter sentence if he cooperates fully. You're more forgiving than I'd be. I'm not forgiving everything. I'm being strategic. We want the whole tree, not just one branch. By Monday afternoon, Samuel was back at work. He walked into the state Supreme Court building in his judicial robes, head high, refusing to show weakness. His colleagues greeted him with hugs, handshakes, and promises of support. Chief Justice Margaret Reynolds pulled him into her chambers. Samuel, take time off, as much as you need. We'll cover your caseload. No, I'm not taking time off. I'm not hiding. I'm working. You were traumatized. I was assaulted. I was arrested. I was threatened. But I'm still here. And if I disappear now, it sends a message that they won, that they broke me. I won't give them that satisfaction. Margaret studied him for a long moment. You're sure? I'm sure. Then let's get to work. We have 17 cases on the docket this week. Samuel threw himself into the work. He reviewed briefs, heard arguments, wrote opinions. He did his job with the same precision and dedication he always had. But now there was an edge to it, a personal understanding of how the system could fail, how justice could be twisted, how power could corrupt. He thought about that every time he presided over a criminal case, every time a prosecutor argued for conviction, every time a defense attorney claimed police misconduct. He thought about Miller's gun pressed to his temple. He thought about Brody's threats. He thought about the neighbors who looked away. And he vowed never to look away again. Tuesday morning brought a development Samuel hadn't anticipated. Marcus Cole walked into his chambers unannounced, carrying a worn leather folder and an expression that said he'd been up all night. Cole was a private investigator who'd worked with Samuel on 3 previous cases involving police corruption. He was 62, black ex-military, and had a reputation for finding things people desperately wanted to stay hidden. "Justice Thorne, we need to talk, now." Samuel gestured to the chair across from his desk. "What did you find?" Cole opened the folder and spread out photographs, bank statements, and phone records.
You
asked me to dig into Brody's background. I went back 20 years. Samuel, this man isn't just corrupt. He's a criminal enterprise disguised as a police chief. Look at this. The first photograph showed Brody standing outside a warehouse with 3 men Samuel didn't recognize. Who are they? That one on the left is Vincent Moretti. He runs most of the illegal gambling operations in the tri-state area. The one next to him is his lawyer. The third one is his accountant. This photo was taken 6 months ago. Samuel felt his stomach drop. Brody's working with organized crime. Not working with them, working for them. I traced payments from Moretti's shell companies to accounts controlled by Brody. We're talking about $2 million over 5 years. In exchange, Brody makes sure certain businesses don't get raided, certain people don't get arrested, certain investigations don't move forward. Jesus Christ. It gets worse. Moretti's organization is suspected in 4 murders over the last 3 years, all unsolved. All witnesses either disappeared or recanted their testimony. Guess who was in charge of those investigations? Brody. Brody, and Samuel Miller was his enforcer. Look at these incident reports. Cole pulled out another stack of papers. Every time someone threatened to testify against Moretti's people, Miller would show up at their house. Suspicious person calls, welfare checks, traffic stops. Nothing illegal on paper, but the message was clear, shut up or else. Samuel thought about the gun pressed to his temple, about Miller's whispered threat that he could lose everything. This wasn't just about racism or bad policing. This was about a criminal conspiracy that had infiltrated the entire police department. Does the FBI know about this? Not yet. I wanted to bring it to you first. This changes everything. This isn't just civil rights violations. This is RICO territory. Racketeering. Conspiracy, obstruction of justice, witness intimidation. If we can prove Brody and Miller were acting on Moretti's behalf, we can take down the whole organization. Samuel picked up his phone and called Agent Morrison. She was in his office 20 minutes later with Agent Hayes and a federal prosecutor named Catherine Liu, who specialized in organized crime cases. Liu studied Cole's evidence with the intensity of a surgeon examining x-rays. This is solid, really solid, but we need more. We need witnesses willing to testify that Brody protected Moretti's operations. We need communications between them. We need proof that the money wasn't legitimate consulting fees. I can get you witnesses, Cole said. I know 3 people who were intimidated by Miller on Brody's orders. They wouldn't talk before because they were scared, but now that Brody's in custody, maybe they'll open up. Make it happen, Morrison said. But we need to move fast. Moretti knows Brody's been arrested. He's probably destroying evidence right now. We need to hit him before he can clean house. Samuel leaned back in his chair, his mind racing through the implications. If Moretti finds out Brody might flip, what do you think he'll do? The room went quiet. They all knew the answer. Organized crime didn't leave loose ends. Brody was a liability now, and liabilities had a way of disappearing. We need to offer Brody protection, Samuel said. And we need to offer him a deal, full cooperation in exchange for witness protection and a reduced sentence. Hayes shook his head. Justice Thorne, with respect, this man tried to cover up your assault. He threatened you. He's corrupt to his core. Why would you want to cut him a deal? Because I want Moretti more. Because taking down one dirty cop is justice, but taking down an entire criminal network is transformation. How many people has Moretti hurt? How many lives has he destroyed? How many murders has he gotten away with? Because Brody protected him. If giving Brody a deal means stopping all that, then I'll make peace with it. Lou nodded slowly. It's the right tactical move. But Samuel, you know what this means. Brody will have to testify. He'll have to admit everything he did, including what he did to you. And his defense attorney will try to discredit him by pointing out he's getting a deal. They'll say he's lying to save himself. Let them say it. We'll have corroborating evidence. We'll have witnesses. We'll have financial records. Brody's testimony will be the thread that ties everything together, but it won't be the only thread. Morrison pulled out her phone. I'll talk to the U.S. attorney. If he approves a cooperation agreement, we can approach Brody's lawyer today. Samuel watched her make the call and felt the weight of what he was doing. He was about to give mercy to a man who'd shown him none. He was about to help the person who tried to destroy him. And he was doing it because sometimes justice required compromise, required sacrifice, required setting aside personal vengeance for the greater good. Grace would understand. His sons might not. The public definitely wouldn't. But Samuel hadn't become a judge to make popular decisions. He'd become a judge to make right ones. By Tuesday afternoon, the U.S. attorney had approved a preliminary cooperation agreement. Brody's lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia Hernandez, came to the federal building to hear the offer. Samuel insisted on being there. Hernandez looked surprised when she walked into the conference room and saw him sitting at the table in his judicial robes. Justice Thorne, I didn't expect to see you here. I wanted to make sure your client understands the stakes. Please sit. She sat. Morrison laid out the terms. Full cooperation. Complete testimony about Moretti's criminal enterprise. Admission of guilt to corruption charges. In exchange, the federal civil rights charges would be dropped. He'd serve a reduced sentence in a federal facility with witness protection, and his family would be relocated and protected. What kind of sentence are we talking about? Hernandez asked. 10 years eligible for parole after 7. Compared to the 40 he's looking at if convicted on all charges, it's generous. Hernandez tapped her pen against her legal pad. I need to speak with my client. Of course, but Ms. Hernandez's time is critical. Moretti knows Brody's been arrested. Every hour we wait is an hour he uses to cover his tracks. If your client wants this deal, we need an answer by end of business today. She left. Samuel waited with the FBI agents and prosecutors, drinking bad coffee and reviewing Cole's evidence. Grace called to check on him. His son Marcus called to say he was coming home this weekend no matter what Samuel said. Sarah Martinez called to say she'd found 2 more victims willing to go on record. And then Hernandez called back. We'll take the deal, but Chief Brody wants assurances. He wants it in writing that his family will be protected. He wants guarantees about which facility he'll serve time in. And he wants to speak to Justice Thorne personally before he agrees. Morrison looked at Samuel. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Set it up. They brought Brody to a secure meeting room in the federal courthouse. He looked smaller than he had at the precinct, diminished without his uniform and badge and power. His hands were cuffed in front of him. His face was pale and drawn. When he saw Samuel, something flickered in his eyes, shame, maybe, or fear, or the realization that the man he'd threatened now held his fate in his hands. Samuel sat across from him. The federal agents stepped outside but remained visible through the window. It was just the 2 of them, separated by a table and by everything that had happened. Why? Brody asked. His voice was hoarse. Why are you helping me? I'm not helping you. I'm helping the 17 people you hurt and the dozens more that Moretti hurt while you looked the other way. You're just the tool I'm using to get justice for them. Brody flinched. You think I don't know I screwed up? You think I don't regret what happened? I don't care about your regrets. I care about your testimony. Agent Morrison said you're ready to cooperate. Is that true? If I don't cooperate, I'll spend the rest of my life in prison. If I do cooperate, Moretti will try to kill me. Those are my options. Some choice. You made your choices a long time ago, when you took that first payment, when you covered up that first complaint, when you threatened that first witness. This is just where those choices led you. Brody looked down at his cuffed hands. I didn't start out corrupt. I was a good cop once. I believed in the work, but the system broke me down. Low pay, long hours, no support, constant criticism. And then Moretti offered me money, a lot of money, enough to put my kids through college, buy a house, have a life. I told myself I was just looking the other way, on small stuff. Gambling protection money, nothing that hurt anybody, but it never stays small, does it? No, it doesn't, and now here we are. You hate me, I can see it in your eyes. Samuel considered the question. Did he hate Brody? He wanted to. Hate was clean and simple and justified. But what he actually felt was more complicated anger, yes, but also pity for a man who'd sold his integrity piece by piece until there was nothing left. I don't hate you, Samuel said finally. I hate what you represent. I hate that the system failed you, and you failed everyone else in return. I hate that good people suffered because you were too weak to stand up to Moretti, but you personally, you're just pathetic." Brody's face reddened. "You self-righteous son of a—" "Careful, you're talking to a Supreme Court justice. Show some respect." The words hung in the air. Brody stared at Samuel, and Samuel stared back, and in that moment they both understood the power dynamic. Samuel held all the cards. Brody had none. The only question was whether Brody was smart enough to play the hand he'd been dealt. "What do you want from me?" Brody asked finally. "Everything. Every payment you received. Every crime you covered up. Every order you gave to Miller and the others. Every communication with Moretti. Every witness you intimidated. Every piece of evidence you destroyed. I want you to burn it all out, including yourself. Can you do that?" "If I do, my career is over. My reputation is destroyed. My kids will grow up knowing their father was a criminal. Your kids will grow up knowing their father chose to do the right thing in the end. That's more than most criminals can say. Take the deal, Chief. It's the only decent option you have left." Brody closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the fight had gone out of him. "Okay, I'll cooperate, but I want that protection agreement in writing, and I want my family relocated before I testify. I'm not giving Moretti a chance to hurt them." "Done. Agent Morrison will handle the details. You'll be moved to a secure facility tonight. Your family will be in protective custody by tomorrow morning. And Chief, if you hold anything back, if you lie, if you try to protect anyone, this deal is void, and you'll face every charge we can throw at you. Understand?" "I understand." Samuel stood and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle and looked back at Brody one last time. "You destroyed a lot of lives. You corrupted an institution that people depend on. You betrayed every good cop who puts on that uniform and tries to do right. I hope whatever years you have left, you spend them thinking about that. I hope it keeps you up at night." He left before Brody could respond. Outside in the hallway, Morrison was waiting with paperwork. He signed the cooperation agreement. "We're moving him tonight. His family is already being contacted." "What about Moretti?" "We're executing search warrants tomorrow morning. 6 locations, his house, his office, 3 warehouses, and a restaurant he uses as a front. We'll have 50 agents on the ground. If there's evidence, we'll find it." Samuel nodded. "I want to be there when you arrest him." Morrison hesitated. "Justice Thorne, that's not protocol. You're a witness in a related case. Your presence could compromise." "I'm also a Supreme Court justice with the authority to observe law enforcement operations. I'm not asking to participate. I'm asking to watch. To see the man who corrupted my city's police department get taken down." She studied his face and must have seen something there that made her decide not to argue. "Fine, but you stay in the command vehicle. You don't approach Moretti. You don't speak to him. You're an observer only." "Agreed." That night, Samuel couldn't sleep. He lay in bed next to Grace, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened in the last 72 hours. Saturday morning, he'd been a respected judge living a quiet life. Now he was the center of a federal investigation that was about to bring down a corrupt police chief and a mob boss. "You're thinking too loud," Grace murmured. "Sorry. Are you okay? Really okay?" Samuel considered the question. Was he okay? His shoulder still ached from where Miller had wrenched his arm. He kept seeing the gun every time he closed his eyes. He jumped when doors slammed. He felt his heart race when patrol cars drove past his house. No, he wasn't okay, but he was functioning, and sometimes that was enough. "I will be," he said, "once this is over. Once Moretti's in custody and the department is cleaned up and we've done everything we can to make sure this doesn't happen to someone else. And then what? Then I go back to being a judge. I hear cases. I write opinions. I try to make the system work a little better, same as always." Grace turned to face him in the darkness. "You can't go back to the way things were. You know that, right? This changed you. It changed how you see the world, how you see justice, how you see your own role in all of it. You can't unknow what you know now." She was right, of course. She was always right. Before Saturday, he'd understood systemic racism intellectually. He'd read the studies, seen the statistics presided over the cases. But understanding something academically was different from living it. Different from feeling the cold metal of a gun pressed to your temple while a cop called you suspicious for standing in your own driveway. "So what do I do?" he asked. "You use it. You take this pain and this anger and this knowledge, and you use it to make real change. Not just in this case, in every decision you make. You become the judge you always wanted to be, the one who doesn't just apply the law, but shapes it toward justice." Samuel reached for her hand in the darkness. I don't know if I'm strong enough for that. You are. You proved it when you refused to stay silent, when you demanded accountability, when you gave Brody a deal even though you wanted to see him burn. That's strength, Samuel. That's the kind of strength that changes systems. Wednesday morning came cold and gray. Samuel dressed in plain clothes, jeans, a dark jacket, nothing that would identify him as a judge. He met Morrison and Hayes at the FBI field office at 5 a.m. The command vehicle was a nondescript van filled with monitors and communications equipment. 6 other agents were already inside coordinating with the teams on the ground. Moretti's at his house, Morrison said, pointing to a screen showing thermal imaging. We've had surveillance on him since Monday. He hasn't left except to meet with his lawyer yesterday. We think he's scared. He knows Brody's been arrested. He's probably expecting us. Is he dangerous? Samuel asked. Very. He has a concealed carry permit and he's licensed for 4 firearms. We're going in with SWAT and arrest warrants for him and 3 associates. It should be smooth, but with guys like Moretti, you never know. The teams moved out at 6 a.m. Samuel watched on the monitors as black SUVs converged on Moretti's estate, a sprawling property with high walls and security gates. The SWAT team breached the front door with a battering ram. Agents poured inside, shouting commands, clearing rooms with military precision. Moretti didn't resist. He stood in his kitchen in a silk bathrobe and slippers, hands raised, his face calm, like he'd been expecting this. They cuffed him and let him outside. Through the camera feed, Samuel got his first clear look at the man who'd corrupted his city's police force. Moretti was 60, with silver hair, slicked back, cold eyes, and the bearing of someone who'd never faced consequences for his actions. Until now. We got him, Morrison said. And look at this, the warrant team just found a safe in his office. They're opening it now. The camera showed agents using a torch to cut through the safe's lock. When it swung open, they pulled out stacks of cash, multiple ledgers, and a laptop computer. One agent held up a ledger to the camera. Even from the grainy video feed, Samuel could see names and numbers, payments, dates, transactions. That's evidence of the protection racket, Hayes said. If those ledgers show payments to Brody, we've got him cold. They brought Moretti to the federal building in handcuffs. Samuel watched from the command vehicle as they walked him through the garage and into the elevator. The man never stopped smiling. Even caught, even facing decades in prison, he looked confident, like this was just a minor inconvenience, like he'd been arrested before and always found a way out. But he hadn't counted on Brody flipping. He hadn't counted on a Supreme Court justice refusing to stay quiet. And he definitely hadn't counted on the mountain of evidence the FBI was about to bury him under. Samuel went home at noon, exhausted, but satisfied. Grace met him at the door with lunch and questions. He told her about the arrest, about the evidence, about Moretti's smug smile that would disappear once he realized how badly he was cornered. You did it, Grace said. You got him. We're not done yet. Arrest is just the beginning. We still have to prosecute to convince a jury to survive appeals. This could take years. Then we'll fight for years. We've done harder things. Samuel's phone rang. It was Sarah Martinez. Justice Thorne, I just got a call from Channel 7. They want to do a 1-hour special on the case. They want to interview you, the witnesses, the FBI. They want to tell the whole story. Will you do it? Samuel thought about it. Part of him wanted to say no, wanted to handle this through the courts and let the legal process play out without media interference. But another part, the part that had watched neighbors close their curtains, that had seen good people stay silent, that understood the power of public pressure, knew that media attention was crucial. Yes, I'll do it, but on one condition: you give equal time to the other victims. Anthony Marshall, who was beaten, Carmen Rodriguez, who was harassed, Marcus Johnson, who was wrongly arrested. This isn't just my story, it's theirs too. Agreed. We'll start filming next week. Justice Thorne, this is going to reach millions of people. This is going to change things. Samuel hoped she was right. He called Anthony Marshall first, a 43-year-old mechanic who Miller had beaten during a traffic stop 3 years ago. He'd filed a complaint. Brody had dismissed it. Mr. Marshall, this is Justice Samuel Thorne. I'd like to talk to you about what happened to you. There was a long pause. Then, you're the judge from the news, the one who got arrested. That's right, and I'm working with the FBI to build a case against the officers who hurt you. Will you help me? Another pause. They told me there was nothing they could do. They told me to drop it. They told me if I pushed it, things would get worse for me. They lied. There's everything we can do, but I need your testimony. I need you to tell your story on camera to a federal jury. Can you do that? I don't know. I'm scared. These guys, they know where I live. They know where I work. What if they come after me? They're in federal custody. They can't hurt you anymore, and if you testify, if we convict them, they'll never hurt anyone else. Please, Mr. Marshall, help me stop them." He heard breathing on the other end of the line, heard a man wrestling with fear and anger and the desperate hope that maybe finally someone would listen. "Okay," Marshall said quietly. "I'll testify. God help me, I'll do it." Samuel made 16 more calls that afternoon. Carmen Rodriguez agreed to testify. So did Marcus Johnson. So did a woman named Jennifer Wu, who Miller had pulled over and searched without cause. So did a teenager named Deshaun Williams, who'd been stopped and frisked on his way home from school. One by one, they agreed to stand up, to speak out, to refuse silence. By Thursday morning, the case was coming together like pieces of a puzzle. The FBI had analyzed Moretti's ledgers and found payments to Brody totaling $2.3 million over 6 years. They'd found emails between Brody and Moretti discussing problems that needed to be handled. They'd found text messages between Miller and Brody coordinating intimidation campaigns against witnesses. They'd found everything they needed to prove a criminal conspiracy. Brody's deposition was scheduled for Friday. Samuel wanted to be there, but knew he couldn't. He was too involved, too close, too much of a victim to maintain objectivity. So he stayed in his chambers at the courthouse and tried to focus on his regular work while his phone buzzed with updates. At 2 p.m., Morrison called. "Brody's giving us everything. He's admitting to taking payments from Moretti. He's admitting to ordering Miller and others to intimidate witnesses. He's admitting to covering up crimes. He's burning it all down, just like you asked." "How's he holding up?" "Barely. He cried twice. His lawyer had to call for breaks. But he's pushing through. I think your conversation with him made an impact. He knows this is his only path to any kind of redemption." Samuel felt no satisfaction from Brody's tears, just a grim acknowledgement that justice, real justice, was messy and complicated and sometimes required breaking people to fix systems. Friday afternoon, Agent Morrison stopped by Samuel's chambers with a folder. The grand jury returned indictments. Moretti faces 18 federal charges, including racketeering, conspiracy, witness tampering, and corruption of public officials. If convicted on all counts, he's looking at life without parole. Miller faces federal civil rights violations, assault, false arrest, conspiracy, and obstruction. Maximum sentence 45 years. 3 other officers were also indicted. When's the trial? Preliminary hearings start in 3 weeks. Actual trial probably 6 months from now. We're moving fast because we want to strike while the evidence is fresh and before Moretti's lawyers can mount an effective defense. Samuel nodded. "What do you need from me?" "Your testimony. Full deposition next week. Trial testimony when the time comes. And Samuel, the defense is going to come after you hard. They'll question your credibility, suggest you're biased, imply you're using your position to pursue a vendetta. You need to be prepared for that." "I've been preparing for that my whole career. Let them come." That weekend, his sons came home. Marcus arrived Friday night, David Saturday morning. Samuel hadn't seen them since Christmas, and the change in their faces shocked him. They looked older, harder, like they'd aged years in the 3 days since the video went public. Marcus hugged him first. "Dad, I watched that video 20 times. Every time I think about what could have happened. Don't. I'm here. I'm fine. We're going to fix this." David was quieter, more withdrawn. He'd always been the sensitive one, the one who took things personally. "I always thought if we worked hard enough, if we were successful enough, if we did everything right, we'd be safe. But that's not true, is it?" Samuel looked at his youngest son and felt his heart break. "No, it's not true. Success doesn't protect us. Money doesn't protect us. Education doesn't protect us. The only thing that protects us is demanding accountability and refusing to accept anything less." They spent the weekend together as a family. Grace made Samuel's favorite meals. They watched movies. They avoided the news and the phone calls and the constant media attention. For 2 days, they pretended everything was normal, even though they all knew nothing would ever be normal again. Sunday night, Samuel's mother called from Georgia. She was 83, had marched with Dr. King, had raised Samuel to believe the arc of the moral universe bent toward justice. She'd watched the video like everyone else. "Baby, are you okay?" Her voice was shaky with emotion. "I'm okay, Mama, I promise." "When I saw that gun pressed to your head, when I saw that officer treating you like you were nothing, Samuel, I thought I was going to lose you. I thought I was going to bury my son because some cop couldn't see past the color of your skin. But you didn't lose me. I'm here, and I'm fighting back. I know you are. I'm proud of you, so proud. But Samuel, be careful. These people, they're dangerous. They have power. They have connections. They don't give up easy. Neither do I. You raised me better than that." She laughed through tears. "I guess I did. You go get them, baby. You make them pay for what they did, and you make sure it never happens again. Monday morning, Samuel returned to work. The courthouse was different now. People looked at him differently. Some with respect, some with pity, some with fear that if it could happen to a Supreme Court justice, it could happen to anyone. His colleagues treated him carefully like he might break if they said the wrong thing. He hated it. He didn't want special treatment. He didn't want kid gloves. He wanted to do his job and prove that he hadn't been diminished by what happened. The first case on his docket was a criminal appeal. A black man convicted of armed robbery was challenging his conviction based on police misconduct during the investigation. Before the incident with Miller, Samuel might have given the appeal a standard review, might have deferred to the lower court's findings, might have upheld the conviction. Now he read every word of the trial transcript. He studied every piece of evidence. He examined every police report with a skeptical eye, looking for the kinds of lies and distortions and convenient omissions he now knew were commonplace. And he found them. The arresting officer's testimony didn't match the physical evidence. The search warrant was based on information from an informant who didn't exist. The defendant's alibi had been ignored. The whole case stank of the kind of corner-cutting and rights violating that Miller and Brody had perfected. Samuel wrote a scathing opinion overturning the conviction. He didn't just reverse on technical grounds, he used the opinion to articulate new standards for evaluating police testimony, for scrutinizing search warrants, for protecting defendants' rights. He knew it would be controversial. He knew prosecutors would hate it. He knew some of his colleagues would think he'd gone too far. He didn't care. This was what Grace had meant when she said he couldn't go back to the way things were. This was him using his power to reshape the law toward justice. Chief Justice Reynolds called him into her office after he circulated the opinion. "Samuel, this is going to cause problems. Every conviction in the state is going to be challenged based on this precedent. Prosecutors are going to scream. The Attorney General is going to call me." "Let them scream. The precedent is sound. The law is clear. And if convictions were obtained through misconduct, they should be challenged." Reynolds studied him. "You've changed?" "Yes, I have." "Is that going to be a problem?" Samuel met her eyes. "Only if you think holding police accountable for their actions is a problem." She smiled. "Then I guess we don't have a problem. Just be prepared for the backlash. It's coming." She was right. By Tuesday afternoon, the opinion had leaked and the reaction was explosive. The police union issued a statement calling it an attack on law enforcement. Conservative media outlets accused Samuel of being biased and letting his personal experience cloud his judgment. The Attorney General held a press conference expressing deep concern about the precedent. But civil rights organizations praised it. Defense attorneys called it groundbreaking. Law professors wrote articles analyzing its implications. And most importantly, defendants who'd been convicted based on questionable police testimony started filing appeals. Samuel's office was flooded with calls. His email crashed twice from the volume of messages. Death threats came in through social media. The FBI increased security at his home and the courthouse. Grace had to change her phone number after reporters started calling at all hours. Through it all, Samuel kept working. He heard cases. He wrote opinions. He met with law clerks and colleagues. He testified at his deposition for the Moretti case, spending 8 hours answering questions about what happened Saturday morning, what Miller said, what Brody threatened, how it felt to have a gun pressed to his head. His voice stayed steady. His answers stayed precise. But inside, he was reliving it. It and all, the fear, the rage, the helplessness, the terrible knowledge that he might die in his own driveway while his neighbors watched and did nothing. The prosecutor asked him one final question. "Justice Thorne, why did you refuse Chief Brody's offer to make this go away? Most people would have taken the settlement signed, the NDA moved on with their lives. Why didn't you?" Samuel thought about all the people who'd been hurt before him, all the complaints that were dismissed, all the witnesses who were threatened into silence, all the victims who were told to shut up and accept that this was just how things were. "Because," he said quietly, "I took an oath. When I became a judge, I swore to uphold the Constitution, to ensure equal justice under law, to defend the rights of every citizen, regardless of who they are or what they look like. How could I keep that oath if I stayed silent about my own rights being violated? How could I demand accountability from my courtroom if I didn't demand it for myself? The answer is I couldn't, so I spoke up, and I'll keep speaking up until this system is fixed, or I'm dead, whichever comes first." The prosecutor nodded. No further questions. The deposition ended at 6 p.m. Samuel walked out of the federal building into a wall of cameras and reporters. They'd been waiting for hours, microphones ready, questions prepared. He'd planned to say nothing, to walk past them to his car and drive home, but when he saw the crowd, saw the people holding signs that said "Justice for Justice Thorne" and "End Police Brutality," he stopped. "I'll take a few questions," he said. The crowd erupted. Reporters shouted over each other. Samuel pointed to a woman in the front, a local reporter he recognized from covering the courthouse. "Justice Thorne, how did it feel to give that deposition? Like ripping off a bandage, painful but necessary." Next question. A man from a national network pushed forward. "Some critics say you're using your position as a judge to pursue a personal vendetta. How do you respond?" "I'd say they're confusing accountability with vengeance. I'm not pursuing anyone. The FBI is pursuing criminals who violated federal law. I'm simply cooperating with their investigation, same as any other victim would. The difference is I have the platform to make sure this doesn't get swept under the rug. And yes, I'm going to use that platform." Next. A young black reporter from an online news site raised her hand. "What do you say to people who are scared this could happen to them?" Samuel paused. This was the question that mattered. This was why he'd stopped to talk instead of walking away. "I say you're right to be scared, because it could happen to you. It has happened to too many people who didn't have the resources or the platform to fight back. But I also say this, we're not powerless. We have rights, we have laws, we have each other. And when we stand together, when we refuse to accept injustice, when we demand accountability, we can change things. That's what this case is about. Not just what happened to me, but what's been happening for years and what we're going to stop from happening again." He took 2 more questions, and then his security detail FBI agents assigned to protect him ushered him to his car. The drive home took 40 minutes through rush hour traffic. Samuel spent it returning phone calls. His clerk had a question about an opinion. Attorney Chen needed to discuss strategy for the civil suit they were filing against the city. Sarah Martinez wanted to schedule the television interview. Grace was cooking dinner when he got home. The smell of her famous chicken and rice filled the house familiar and comforting. She looked up when he walked in and read his face immediately. Hard day, long day, but we're making progress. They ate dinner mostly in silence. Samuel was too tired to talk, and Grace understood. After dinner, he retreated to his study with a glass of whiskey and the case files Morrison had given him. He needed to understand everything before the trial started. Every detail, every witness, every piece of evidence. The doorbell rang at 8 p.m. Through the window, Samuel saw Marcus Cole standing on the porch. He opened the door, and Cole walked in carrying his leather folder and a look that said he'd found something big. "Justice Thorne, I've been digging deeper into Moretti's organization. I found something you need to see." They went to the study. Cole spread out new documents on Samuel's desk. More bank records, more photographs, more proof of corruption that went deeper than anyone had realized. Moretti didn't just corrupt Westbrook PD. He had connections in 3 other departments: state police, sheriff's office, even the county prosecutor's office. Look at these payments. Samuel studied the records. Thousands of dollars flowing from Moretti's shell companies to accounts connected to law enforcement officials across the region. How many people are we talking about? At least 20, maybe more. This is a network, Samuel, a web of corruption that Moretti built over decades. Brody was just one piece. Samuel felt sick. 20 corrupt cops. How many lives had they destroyed? How many criminals had they protected? How many innocent people had they framed? Does the FBI know? "I'm telling them tomorrow, but I wanted you to see it first. This case is bigger than you thought. Taking down Moretti and Brody won't be enough. We have to dismantle the entire network." "Then that's what we'll do, whatever it takes." Cole left at 9. Samuel poured another whiskey and called Agent Morrison. "We need to talk. Tomorrow." Cole found evidence that Moretti's corruption extends way beyond Westbrook PD. Morrison swore softly. "How far?" 3 other departments, maybe more. Can you meet tomorrow morning?" "I'll be at your office at 7. Samuel hung up and sat in the darkness of his study thinking about what Cole had found. 20 corrupt officials. How many more victims were out there? How many other people had experienced what he'd experienced but didn't have his resources to fight back? His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You should stop. People who don't stop end up hurt." Samuel forwarded it to Morrison and got a response within seconds. "We're tracing it. Increasing your security detail. Don't go anywhere alone." He showed the text to Grace. She went pale, but her voice stayed steady. "They're scared. That's why they're threatening you, because they know you're winning. Or because they're preparing to do something desperate. Then we prepare too. We don't back down, we don't give them the satisfaction." But Samuel saw the fear in her eyes, and it mirrored his own. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about survival. Moretti's organization was cornered, and cornered animals were dangerous. Morrison arrived at 7 the next morning with Agent Hayes and 2 additional agents Samuel didn't recognize. They set up in his chambers, and Cole walked them through everything he'd found. The payments, the connections, the web of corruption. This is RICO on steroids, Hayes said. We're talking about a criminal enterprise that infiltrated multiple law enforcement agencies. The scope is massive. How do we prosecute it? Samuel asked. Carefully. We start with Moretti and Brody. Use their testimony to identify the other corrupt officials. Flip them one by one. Build the case from the inside out. It'll take time, maybe years, but if we do it right, we can clean up the whole system. Morrison pulled out a list. We've already identified 12 officers from the other departments who took payments. We're preparing warrants now. By the end of the week, we'll have them all in custody. Samuel felt a surge of hope mixed with exhaustion. This was what justice looked like, not quick, not clean, but thorough, comprehensive, uncompromising. What do you need from me? Keep doing what you're doing, keep speaking out, keep applying pressure. The more public attention this gets, the harder it is for people to obstruct or interfere. You're our insurance policy, Justice Thorne. As long as you're visible, as long as you're vocal, they can't make this go away. That afternoon, Samuel had another visitor. Brooks, the young officer who'd resigned rather than participate in the cover-up, knocked on his door looking nervous. Justice Thorne, I wanted to update you. I've been cooperating with the FBI. I gave them everything I know about the department, and I wanted to say I'm sorry. I should have spoken up sooner. I should have reported the corruption years ago. I was scared. I needed the job. I told myself it wasn't my problem. Samuel gestured for him to sit. Why are you telling me this from... Because I want you to know I'm not looking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I am trying to do better. I'm testifying against Brody, against Miller, against all of them. And after this is over, I'm going back to school. Maybe teaching, maybe social work, something where I can actually help people instead of hurting them. That takes courage. Brooks laughed bitterly. Know what you did takes courage. Walking into that precinct knowing what Brody would do. Standing up to them. Refusing to be silenced. That's courage. I'm just trying to salvage what's left of my conscience. Brooks, the system doesn't change because of perfect people. It changes because of people who make mistakes and then choose to do better. You made that choice. That matters. Brooks nodded, his eyes wet. Thank you, sir. That means more than you know. After he left, Samuel sat alone in his chambers and thought about redemption, about people like Brooks and Brody who'd done wrong but were trying to make it right, about whether second chances were earned or given, about how to balance justice with mercy. His phone rang. It was Maria Vance, the reporter. Samuel, I need to give you a heads up. Channel 7 special airs tonight. It's powerful, really powerful, but it's also going to make a lot of people angry. The police union is already threatening to sue us. Conservative politicians are calling for boycotts. This is going to blow up. Good, let it blow up. The truth doesn't change just because it makes people uncomfortable. I'm glad you feel that way because we're leading with your story. The arrest, the gun, Brody's threats, all of it. And then we're showing the pattern. All the other victims, all the complaints that were ignored. We're connecting the dots in a way that makes it impossible to claim this was just one bad incident. When does it air? 9 p.m., 60 minutes. I suggest you watch it with your family. It's going to be emotional. That evening, Samuel and Grace sat in their living room with their sons. The special opened with Sarah's video, the full, unedited footage of Miller pulling his gun of Samuel's hands in the air of the arrest. Marcus and David watched in silence, their faces tight with anger and fear. Then Maria appeared on screen. What you just watched happened to Justice Samuel Thorne, a member of the state Supreme Court, in his own driveway, but he's not the only victim. Over the next hour, you'll hear from 17 other people who suffered similar abuse at the hands of officers from the Westbrook Police Department. And you'll learn how a culture of corruption, protected by Chief Frank Brody and enabled by organized crime boss Vincent Moretti, turned a police department into a criminal enterprise. The special was devastating. Anthony Marshall described being beaten so badly he needed surgery. Carmen Rodriguez talked about being sexually harassed and then threatened when she tried to report it. Marcus Johnson explained spending 3 days in jail for a crime he didn't commit, losing his job, nearly losing his apartment. One by one, the victims told their stories, and Maria connected each story to Brody, to Miller, to Moretti. When Samuel's interview aired, Grace reached for his hand. On screen, he talked about the gun pressed to his temple, about the fear, about the rage, about the determination to make sure this never happened again. I had resources most people don't have, Samuel said to the camera. I had Education Connections platform, and even with all that, I felt powerless in that moment. Imagine how it feels for people who don't have those resources, people who are told to shut up and accept it, people who are threatened into silence. That's who we're fighting for. That's why this matters. The special ended with a call to action. Contact your representatives. Demand police reform. Support the victims. And most importantly, don't look away. Samuel's phone exploded the moment the credits rolled. Texts, calls, emails all flooding in at once. Supporters praising his courage. Critics accusing him of being anti-police. Reporters requesting interviews. Civil rights organizations asking him to speak at rallies. He ignored all of it. His sons needed him more than strangers on the internet. Dad, Marcus said quietly, "I didn't realize how close you came to dying. I'm here, I'm okay. But you almost weren't. And that could have been me, or David, or any black man in America. How do we live with that? How do we go out in the world knowing that any traffic stop, any encounter with police could be our last?" Samuel had no good answer. This was the conversation every black parent had with their children at some point. The talk about how to survive police encounters. How to keep your hands visible. How to say yes, sir, and no, sir, even when you want to scream. How to swallow your pride and your anger and your dignity because your life depends on it. "You live with it by fighting to change it," Samuel said finally, "by refusing to accept that this is just how things are, by standing up even when it's scary, by using your voice and your vote and your power to demand better. That's how we live with it, son. We don't accept it. We change it." David spoke up, his voice shaking. "But what if we can't change it? What if we fight and nothing ever gets better?" "Then we fight anyway, because the alternative is giving up, and I didn't raise quitters." "Oh." Grace pulled both boys into a hug. Samuel watched his family and felt the weight of everything he was putting them through. The threats, the media attention, the constant fear. Was it worth it? Was fighting this fight worth risking his family's safety and peace? But then he thought about the 17 other victims who'd spoken up. Thought about Brooks finding his courage. Thought about Sarah recording the video when she could have looked away. Thought about all the people who were depending on him to see this through. Yes, it was worth it. The next morning brought news that both encouraged and terrified him. The 12 officers from other departments that Morrison had identified were arrested overnight. The FBI had executed warrants simultaneously across 3 jurisdictions. More evidence was seized. More testimony was secured. The case was growing stronger by the day, but so was the backlash. Police unions across the state held a joint press conference condemning Samuel and the investigation. They accused him of being biased, of undermining law enforcement, of making it impossible for good cops to do their jobs. Conservative media outlets amplified the message. Politicians who'd built careers on law and order rhetoric suddenly had to choose between supporting police or supporting justice. Most chose police. The governor called Samuel personally. "Justice Thorne, I watched that special last night. What happened to you was wrong, unacceptable, but you need to understand the position this puts me in. I have to support law enforcement. I have to maintain public safety. If cops start thinking they're going to be prosecuted for doing their jobs, they're being prosecuted for committing crimes. There's a difference. To you, maybe. But to the public, to the police unions, to the voters, I need to get reelected. It looks like you're attacking all cops because one cop attacked you." Samuel's voice went cold. "Governor, 17 people were abused by officers from one department. 20 more officers from other departments are implicated in corruption. This isn't about one cop. This is about systemic failure. And if you can't see that if you're more worried about your reelection than about justice, then you're part of the problem." The governor sputtered. "You can't talk to me like that." "I just did. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." He hung up. Grace, who'd been listening from the doorway, smiled. "That's going to cost you politically." "I don't care. I'm not running for office. I'm running toward justice." But the governor wasn't done. That afternoon, he held a press conference announcing a comprehensive review of the justice system to ensure judges weren't overstepping their authority or showing bias. He didn't mention Samuel by name, but everyone knew who he meant. Chief Justice Reynolds called immediately. "Samuel, we need to talk. The governor is putting pressure on me to investigate you, to determine if you violated judicial ethics by being too involved in this case." "Have I?" "No, you're a victim cooperating with law enforcement. You're entitled to do that. But the optics are complicated. Your opinion overturning that conviction, your public statements, your media appearances, combined with your personal stake in the case, it creates an appearance of bias." "So what do you want me to do?" "Stay silent, let corrupt cops go free because speaking up might look bad." Reynolds sighed. "I want you to be careful. I support you, Samuel, but I can't protect you from political pressure. If the governor pushes hard enough, if the police unions apply enough pressure, the State Judicial Oversight Board might be forced to investigate, and that could compromise everything you're trying to accomplish." Samuel understood. The system was turning against him. Not because he was wrong, but because he was threatening powerful interests. The police unions had political clout. The governor needed their support, and both were willing to destroy a Supreme Court justice to protect corrupt cops. "Let them investigate," Samuel said. "I've done nothing wrong, and I'm not backing down." Over the next week, the pressure intensified. Editorial boards called for Samuel to recuse himself from any cases involving law enforcement. Legal scholars debated whether a judge could be both victim and adjudicator. The Judicial Oversight Board announced a formal inquiry into whether Samuel had violated ethical rules. Through it all, Samuel kept working. He heard cases. He wrote opinions. He refused to be intimidated or silenced. And slowly, the tide began to turn. Support came from unexpected places. Former prosecutors spoke out defending him. Police chiefs from other cities condemned Westbrook PD's corruption. Retired judges wrote op-eds praising his courage. The NAACP organized rallies in his support. Law students circulated petitions calling for reform. And the other victims, those 17 people who'd been brave enough to share their stories, became activists themselves. Anthony Marshall started speaking at community meetings. Carmen Rodriguez lobbied state legislators for police reform. Marcus Johnson organized protests demanding accountability. Sarah Martinez's follow-up articles kept the pressure on. She documented every arrest, every indictment, every piece of evidence that emerged. She interviewed witnesses who'd been too scared to speak before. She connected dots that law enforcement had deliberately obscured. Her reporting was nominated for a Pulitzer. 2 weeks before the trial was scheduled to begin, Samuel received an unexpected call from Moretti's attorney, a woman named Diana Frost, one of the most expensive defense lawyers in the country. "Justice Thorne, I'd like to meet with you, off the record. No lawyers, no FBI, just the two of us." "Why would I do that?" "Because my client wants to make a deal, and he specifically requested that I speak to you first." Samuel knew it was a trap, or at least a manipulation, but he was curious. "What kind of deal?" "The kind where everyone wins. My client pleads to reduce charges, provides information about corruption in other cities, and you get the systemic reform you want. Everybody goes home happy. Except for the people he hurt, except for the victims who want justice, not compromise." "Justice is compromise, Justice Thorne. You know that. You've been a judge long enough to understand that perfect justice doesn't exist. Only negotiated outcomes that everyone can live with." Samuel thought about it. Moretti was facing life in prison. If they could flip him, use him to expose corruption nationwide, the impact could be enormous. But it would mean Moretti escaping full accountability. It would mean another plea deal, another compromise, another instance of powerful people avoiding consequences. "I'll meet with you," Samuel said, "but I'm not promising anything." They met in a conference room at a downtown hotel. Frost was exactly what Samuel expected. Perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, perfectly prepared to defend the indefensible. "Thank you for coming. I'll be direct. My client is looking at spending the rest of his life in federal prison. He's 60 years old. That's a death sentence. He's willing to cooperate fully to provide testimony about his entire operation to help federal prosecutors build cases against corrupt officials across multiple states. In exchange, he wants 20 years eligible for parole after 15. Samuel laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. "Your client ran a criminal enterprise that corrupted dozens of police officers, intimidated countless witnesses, and is suspected in 4 murders. And you want him out in 15 years. I want him to serve appropriate time while providing maximum benefit to law enforcement. Justice Thorne, you're a smart man. You understand leverage. My client has information about corruption that goes all the way to the state level. Prosecutors, judges, politicians, people you'd never suspect. If he talks, if he provides evidence, you could clean up the entire system. Or he could lie, make false accusations against his enemies, use cooperation as a weapon. Which is why any deal would require corroboration. He provides the information, FBI verifies it, only then does he get the benefit. There's no downside for you." Samuel stared at her. "The downside is that a man who destroyed lives gets to walk free after 15 years. The downside is that we send a message that if you're connected enough, rich enough, important enough, you can buy your way out of anything. The downside is that we perpetuate exactly the kind of two-tiered justice system I'm fighting to dismantle." Frost leaned forward. "I understand your principles. I respect them. But principles don't convict corrupt officials. Evidence does. And my client has evidence you desperately need. Then he should provide it out of civic duty, not for a reduced sentence. That's not how the world works. Maybe it should be." They stared at each other across the table. Samuel knew she was right about the leverage. Moretti's testimony could take down people they hadn't even identified yet, but agreeing to the deal meant swallowing his anger, compromising his principles, accepting that sometimes perfect justice wasn't possible. "I'll take your offer to the prosecutors," Samuel said finally, "but I won't recommend it. That's the best I can do?" "That's all I'm asking." Samuel left the meeting feeling dirty. He'd just negotiated with the man who'd corrupted the police force that brutalized him. He'd considered giving that man a break, and part of him wondered if he was becoming exactly what he hated, someone willing to compromise principles for practical outcomes. He called Grace from his car. "I just met with Moretti's lawyer. They want a deal." "What did you say, Hamid?" "That I'd pass it along but wouldn't recommend it. Was that wrong? Should I have told her to go to hell?" Grace was quiet for a moment. "Do you think taking the deal would lead to more justice in the long run?" "Probably. His testimony could expose corruption we don't even know about yet." "Then you did the right thing. Justice isn't about revenge, Samuel. It's about stopping harm and preventing future harm. If Moretti's deal accomplishes that better than a trial, then maybe it's the right choice. Even though it means he doesn't pay fully for what he did. Even though perfect justice doesn't exist. You taught me that. We just do the best we can with imperfect options." Samuel wanted to believe her, but he thought about Anthony Marshall's broken ribs, about Carmen Rodriguez's trauma, about Marcus Johnson's destroyed life, about his own terror when Miller's gun pressed against his temple. Could any deal, any amount of testimony really balance those scales? He passed Frost's proposal to Agent Morrison that evening. She listened without interrupting, then called in the U.S. Attorney and Catherine Liu. "The offer has merit," Liu said. "Moretti's testimony could be invaluable, but the optics are terrible. We're asking a Supreme Court justice who was victimized by corruption to accept a plea deal for the man who enabled that corruption. The public will see it as weakness, as the system protecting its own again." "What do the other victims think?" Samuel asked. "Have you consulted them?" Morrison shook her head. "Not yet. We wanted your input first." "Then talk to them. All 17. Tell them about the offer. Let them vote on whether to accept it. This isn't just my decision, it's theirs too." Over the next 3 days, FBI agents met with each victim. The responses were mixed. Some wanted Moretti to burn. Others were exhausted by the process and just wanted it over. A few saw the strategic value of flipping him. In the end, they voted 11-6 in favor of accepting the deal. Samuel felt the weight of that decision. 6 people wanted full justice and weren't going to get it, but 11 believed compromising now would lead to greater justice later. Democracy had spoken even if the outcome hurt. The plea agreement was finalized 72 hours before trial was set to begin. Moretti pled guilty to 6 federal charges, agreed to forfeit all assets obtained through criminal activity, and committed to providing complete testimony about his entire operation. In exchange, he received 22 years in federal prison, eligible for parole after 17. The press conference announcing the deal was brutal. Reporters shouted questions. Victims' advocates condemned it. Police union representatives claimed it proved the investigation was politically motivated rather than about justice. Samuel stood next to Morrison and Liu and took the hits. This was not an easy decision, but it was the right decision. Mr. Moretti's cooperation will help us identify and prosecute corrupt officials across multiple jurisdictions. His testimony will provide justice for dozens of victims who've been waiting years for someone to believe them, and his imprisonment ensures he'll never hurt anyone again. That's what justice looks like, imperfect, complicated, but ultimately moving us toward a better system. A reporter shouted, "Do you feel like you sold out?" Samuel met the camera directly. "I feel like I made the best choice available with imperfect options, and if anyone thinks I sold out, I invite them to spend one day doing this work, one day talking to victims, one day seeing the evidence of corruption, one day trying to balance competing priorities and limited resources and impossible choices. Then tell me what you would have done differently." The room went quiet. Samuel turned and walked out, Sva, Morrison, and Liu following. Behind him, he heard reporters scrambling to file their stories. By evening, his statement was everywhere, analyzed and debated and dissected by everyone with an opinion. That night, lying in bed next to Grace, Samuel finally let himself feel the exhaustion. 4 weeks since Miller pulled that gun. 4 weeks of fighting, testifying, strategizing, compromising. 4 weeks of death threats and media scrutiny and political pressure. 4 weeks of trying to transform personal trauma into systemic change. "Are we winning?" he asked Grace in the darkness. "I don't know, but we're fighting. That's what matters." "Is it enough?" "It has to be, because the alternative is giving up, and you're not doing that." No, he wasn't. Tomorrow he'd wake up and go back to work. He'd hear cases and write opinions and continue pushing for reform. He'd deal with the judicial oversight investigation and the political pressure and the constant scrutiny, because that's what justice required. Not perfection, not victory, just persistence. Just the refusal to stop fighting, even when fighting hurt. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Dad, I'm proud of you. I know that deal wasn't what you wanted, but you're doing what needs to be done. That's leadership. Love you." Samuel read it twice and felt tears sting his eye. His son understood. Despite everything, despite the fear and the anger and the disappointment, his son understood what he was trying to do. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was the victory not in the courtroom or the headlines, but in teaching the next generation that justice was worth fighting for even when the fight was hard. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fights, new impossible choices. But tonight, for just a few hours, he could rest knowing he'd done his best. That would have to be enough. Rest didn't come easy. Samuel woke at 3 a.m. to another threatening text, this one more specific than the others. "We know where your sons go to school. We know your wife's schedule. Back off or they pay." He forwarded it to Morrison, who called back within minutes saying they were tracing it and doubling security on Marcus and David immediately. Grace held him while he shook with rage and fear, not for himself, but for his family, who'd done nothing except love. A man who refused to stay quiet. "Maybe I should stop," Samuel whispered. "Maybe it's not worth putting you all at risk." Grace pulled back and looked him in the eyes. "Don't you dare. Don't you give them what they want. We're scared, yes, but we're also strong, and we're not letting terrorists win. They're threatening our children. And if you back down, what message does that send our children? That threats work, that violence wins, that we should hide when things get hard. No, we fight, all of us, together." Samuel called both sons at dawn despite the early hour. Marcus answered on the first ring. "Dad, the FBI already called. They're sending agents to campus. We're okay. We're careful. Don't worry about us." "How can I not worry? You're my sons. And you're our father, the father who taught us to stand up for what's right even when it's scary. We learned that from you, Dad, so stop apologizing for being exactly who you raised us to be." David echoed the sentiment when Samuel called him. "Dad, I'm not scared. I'm angry. I'm angry that people think they can threaten us into silence. I'm angry that this is still happening in 2025, but I'm not backing down. None of us are." Samuel hung up feeling simultaneously terrified and proud. His family was in danger because of choices he'd made, but they were standing with him, not against him. That had to count for something. The trial of Officer David Miller began on a cold Monday morning 6 weeks after the arrest. The federal courthouse was surrounded by protesters, some supporting Miller, claiming he was being persecuted for doing his job, others supporting Samuel and the victims, demanding accountability. Police in riot gear kept the two groups separated. News vans filled the parking lot. Helicopters circled overhead. Samuel arrived in a car with tinted windows flanked by FBI agents. He wore his judicial robes, a deliberate choice. He wanted everyone in that courtroom to remember who Miller had brutalized. Not just a man, a justice, a symbol of the law itself. The courtroom was packed. Every seat filled. Reporters lined the walls. Sketch artists prepared their tablets since cameras weren't allowed. Samuel sat in the witness gallery next to the other victims. Anthony Marshall on his left, Carmen Rodriguez on his right, all 17 of them together united. Miller entered in handcuffs wearing an ill-fitting suit. He'd lost weight in custody. His face was pale and drawn. When he saw Samuel, he flinched. Good. Let him be scared. Let him understand what it felt like to be powerless. Judge Patricia Hernandez, no relation to Brody's attorney, presided. She was 70, had been on the federal bench for 30 years, and had a reputation for running a tight courtroom. She looked at the packed gallery and the armed guards and the tension crackling through the air. "This trial will be conducted with dignity and respect," she said firmly. "I will tolerate no outbursts, no disruptions, no intimidation of witnesses. Anyone who cannot abide by these rules will be removed. Are we clear?" Murmurs of assent rippled through the room. The prosecution's opening statement was delivered by Catherine Liu. She was devastating. She walked the jury through every detail of Samuel's arrest, showed them Sarah's video, explained the pattern of abuse that Miller had perpetrated for years. She introduced evidence of the 17 other victims, the complaints that were dismissed, the culture of corruption that allowed it all to happen. "Officer Miller didn't make a mistake," Liu said. "He didn't misjudge a situation. He targeted Justice Thorne, because Justice Thorne is a black man standing in front of a nice house, and Officer Miller's prejudice told him that black men don't belong in nice houses. His racism told him that black men are criminals who need to be controlled. His corruption told him that he could get away with it because he always had before. But not this time. This time, he picked the wrong victim, and this time there will be consequences. Miller's defense attorney was a man named Gerald Foster, a former prosecutor who'd built a career defending police officers. His opening statement focused on split-second decisions and reasonable suspicion and the dangers cops face every day. Officer Miller responded to a call about a suspicious person, Foster said. He arrived to find a man he didn't recognize in a neighborhood he was assigned to protect. He asked for identification. The man reached toward his waistband, a movement that every officer is trained to recognize as potentially lethal. Officer Miller did what he was trained to do. He protected himself and the community. Was it a misunderstanding? Yes. Was it a tragedy? Absolutely. But was it a crime? No. It was an officer doing his job under difficult circumstances. Samuel listened and felt his blood pressure rise. Foster was lying, twisting facts, making excuses, but that was his job. That was how the system worked. The defense mounted the best case possible, and the prosecution had to prove guilt beyond reasonable doubt. The first witness was Samuel himself. He was sworn in and took the stand, his judicial robes making him look both authoritative and vulnerable. Lou asked him to describe what happened that Saturday morning. Samuel did his voice steady, his memory precise. I pulled into my driveway at approximately 9:47 a.m. I went into my garage to park my car. I walked back out to retrieve my briefcase from the passenger seat. That's when Officer Miller arrived. What did he say to you? He said I didn't belong there. He asked what my business was in the neighborhood. I told him I lived there, that this was my home. He asked for identification. I attempted to retrieve my wallet. He ordered me to put my hands up. Did you comply? Immediately. I raised my hands with my wallet visible between my fingers. I explained that I was getting my identification as he'd requested. What happened next? Samuel took a breath. This was the hard part, reliving the fear. He told me to turn around and put my hands on my head. I asked why. I explained that I lived there, that I hadn't committed any crime. He repeated the order. I complied. Then he grabbed my wrists and forced them behind my back using excessive force that injured my shoulder. He told me to shut up. When I tried to explain, he pulled his weapon. The courtroom went silent. Even though everyone had seen the video, hearing Samuel describe it in his own words made it more real, more personal. Where did he point the weapon? Lou asked. At my head, temple area. He pressed it against my skin. What did he say? Samuel's jaw clenched. He said my rights were whatever he said they were, that he was the law. He threatened me and implied that I was planning to rob houses in the neighborhood. How did that make you feel? Foster objected. Relevance. The witness's feelings aren't at issue here. Judge Hernandez sustained it. Stick to facts, counselor. Lou nodded. Justice Thorne, at any point did Officer Miller ask you to produce identification from your wallet? No, he ordered me to keep my hands up, then arrested me before I could show him anything. Did he run your license plate? Not that I'm aware of. My Mercedes was parked in the driveway in plain view. Running the plate would have shown the vehicle was registered to me at that address. Did he knock on your door to verify your story? No, he arrested me first and dealt with verification, sir. Did he show any interest in actually determining whether you lived there? None. He'd already decided I was guilty of something. He just needed to figure out what to charge me with. Foster's cross-examination was aggressive. He tried to suggest that Samuel had been belligerent, that he'd refused to comply, that his movements had been threatening. But Samuel had spent decades in courtrooms. He knew how to handle hostile questioning. Isn't it true, Justice Thorne, that you quoted the Fourth Amendment to Officer Miller? Yes, because he was violating it. Doesn't that seem confrontational, lecturing an officer about the law? I'm a Supreme Court justice. The law is my profession. If an officer is violating my constitutional rights, I'm entitled to point that out. But you understand that officers have to make split-second decisions in dangerous situations. I understand that officers are supposed to follow the law. They're supposed to have probable cause before detaining someone. They're supposed to use minimum necessary force. Officer Miller did neither. You were reaching toward your waistband. I was retrieving my wallet, at his request. My hands were visible the entire time. There was no threat. But Officer Miller didn't know that. Samuel leaned forward. Officer Miller didn't want to know that. He'd already decided I was guilty. Everything after that was just justification. Foster tried several more angles, but Samuel deflected them all. When he finally stepped down from the witness stand, he felt drained, but satisfied. He'd told his truth. Now it was up to the jury. The next 3 days brought testimony from the other victims. Anthony Marshall described his beating. Carmen Rodriguez talked about the harassment. Marcus Johnson explained his wrongful arrest. One by one, they told their stories, and one by one, a pattern emerged. Miller targeted minorities. He used excessive force. He filed false reports. He was enabled by Brody and protected by a corrupt system. Sarah Martinez testified about recording the video. I saw what was happening and I knew it was wrong. I knew if I didn't record it, no one would believe it happened. So I grabbed my phone and I filmed everything. Foster tried to suggest she'd edited the video or manipulated it somehow. She shut that down immediately. The video was uploaded to cloud storage in real time. Metadata shows it wasn't edited. What you see is exactly what happened. Brooks testified about what he saw at the precinct. When I pulled up Justice Thorne's information and saw who he was, Miller went white. He knew he'd screwed up, and then Chief Brody tried to make it disappear. He ordered me to delete the booking records. When I refused, he threatened my job. Why didn't you delete them? Liu asked. Because it was wrong. Because I became a cop to uphold the law, not break it. Because I couldn't live with myself if I helped cover up something like this. The defense called character witnesses for Miller. Fellow officers who testified about his dedication and bravery. A pastor who talked about his church involvement. His ex-wife who claimed he wasn't racist. But it all felt hollow against the weight of evidence stacked against him. The prosecution's trump card was Moretti's testimony. He'd agreed to cooperate fully, and that included testifying about Miller's role in his organization. The courtroom was electric when he took the stand dressed in an orange jumpsuit, chains at his ankles. Liu established his credibility first. Yes, he was a criminal. Yes, he'd gotten a plea deal. Yes, he had incentive to lie. But the evidence would show he wasn't lying. Then she asked about Miller. Officer Miller worked for you. He worked for Chief Brody, who worked for me. But yes, Miller did jobs for my organization. What kind of jobs? Intimidation, mostly. Someone threatened to testify against my people, Miller would pay them a visit. Traffic stop, welfare check, something official looking. Message was clear, cooperate, and we'll leave you alone. Don't cooperate, and next time might be worse. Did Chief Brody order him to do this? Brody coordinated it. I'd tell Brody who needed to be handled. Brody would send Miller or one of his other guys. They'd file paperwork making it look legitimate. System worked pretty good for years. What changed? Moretti looked directly at Samuel. He changed it. Justice Thorne. Miller made the mistake of targeting someone who couldn't be intimidated. Someone with resources to fight back. Once that video went public, once the FBI got involved, the whole house of cards collapsed. Foster's cross-examination tried to discredit Moretti, tried to suggest he was lying to reduce his sentence. But Moretti was too smart for that. He admitted his crimes freely, admitted he was a criminal who deserved punishment. That made his testimony about Miller even more credible. Why would he lie when he was already going to prison? The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Samuel spent those 72 hours trying to work, trying to sleep, trying not to obsess over every detail of the testimony. Grace kept him grounded. His sons called daily. Sarah Martinez published updates that kept public pressure on. On the 3rd day, the jury sent word they'd reached a verdict. The courtroom filled again. Protesters gathered outside. Samuel took his seat next to the other victims and waited. Miller was brought in. He looked terrified. Good. Judge Hernandez read the verdict slip and showed no emotion. Will the defendant please rise? Miller stood on shaky legs, his attorney beside him. On the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, how do you find... The jury foreman, a black woman in her 50s, looked directly at Miller. Guilty. The courtroom erupted. Judge Hernandez banged her gavel. Order, I will have order. On the charge of assault by a law enforcement officer, how do you find guilty? On the charge of filing false reports, how do you find guilty? On the charge of conspiracy to obstruct justice, how do you find guilty? All counts. Guilty on all counts. Samuel felt something loosen in his chest. Something he hadn't realized was so tight until it released. Not joy exactly. Not satisfaction. Just exhausted relief. The system had worked. Justice had been served. Miller collapsed into his chair. His attorney tried to comfort him, but Miller just stared straight ahead like he couldn't comprehend what had happened. The man who'd thought himself untouchable had just been touched. Hard. Judge Hernandez scheduled sentencing for 3 weeks later. She remanded Miller to custody immediately. As guards let him out in handcuffs, he looked back at Samuel one last time. Samuel held his gaze. He wanted Miller to see that he hadn't broken him, hadn't silenced him, hadn't won. Outside the courthouse, the press conference was jubilant. Lou announced the verdict to cheers from the crowd. Samuel stepped to the microphone with the 17 other victims standing behind him. "Today, the justice system did what it's supposed to do," he said. "It held a corrupt officer accountable. It protected victims. It sent a message that no one is above the law. But this is just one verdict. We still have work to do. We still have a system to fix. We still have a culture to change." Officer Miller was convicted because 17 people were brave enough to speak up. Because one neighbor was courageous enough to record what she saw. Because good cops like Officer Brooks chose integrity over complicity. That's what change looks like. Not one dramatic moment, but dozens of small acts of courage that add up to something bigger. So yes, today we celebrate this victory. Tomorrow we get back to work. The crowd chanted his name. Samuel waved and stepped back from the microphone. He didn't want to be a celebrity or a hero. He just wanted to be a judge who'd done his job, which was ensuring that justice applied to everyone equally. That night, Samuel and Grace hosted a dinner for all the victims at their home. Anthony Marshall brought his wife. Carmen Rodriguez brought her sister. Marcus Johnson brought his new girlfriend, who he'd met at a criminal justice reform meeting. They filled Samuel's dining room and living room, sharing food and stories and the bond that came from surviving trauma together. "Toast," Anthony said, raising his glass. "To Justice Thorne, who turned his pain into our power." "No," Samuel interrupted. "To all of us. I had resources you didn't have. I had a platform you didn't have. All I did was use those advantages for something good. You're the heroes. You spoke up when it was dangerous. You testified when you were scared. You refused to let them silence you. That's courage. I was just doing what you inspired me to do." They drank to that. And as Samuel looked around his living room at these people who'd become friends, who'd become allies, who'd become family through shared struggle, he felt something he hadn't felt since that Saturday morning peace. Not complete peace. The fight wasn't over. But peace in knowing that he'd done the right thing. That his suffering hadn't been meaningless. That together they'd made a difference. Sentencing day arrived with more media attention than the verdict. Judge Hernandez had a reputation for tough sentences, and everyone wanted to know how hard she'd come down on Miller. Samuel arrived early and took his seat. The courtroom filled quickly. Miller was brought in looking resigned, like he'd already accepted his fate. Foster made a last-ditch plea for leniency. He talked about Miller's years of service, his difficult childhood, the pressures of police work. "My client made mistakes. Serious mistakes. But he's not a monster. He's a man who got caught up in a corrupt system. He deserves punishment, but he also deserves mercy." Lou countered with victim impact statements. She read letters from all 17 victims describing how Miller's abuse had affected their lives. Anthony Marshall's injuries required months of physical therapy. Carmen Rodriguez developed PTSD. Marcus Johnson lost his job and his apartment. The damage rippled out far beyond the initial incidents. Then she called Samuel to give his statement in person. He approached the bench and looked at Miller, who wouldn't meet his eyes. "Your Honor, Officer Miller pointed a gun at my head for the crime of standing in my own driveway. He arrested me without cause. He threatened my family. He violated every oath he took when he became a police officer. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that he did it with confidence, with the certainty that he'd get away with it because he always had before. How many other people did he hurt? How many lives did he damage? How many citizens did he terrorize? We'll never know the full extent because so many victims were too scared to come forward. That's the real crime here, not just what he did to me, but what he represented. A system that allowed, enabled, and protected abuse of power. A system that valued police solidarity over justice. A system that failed the very people it was supposed to protect. I'm asking this court to send a message. Not just to Officer Miller, but to every cop who thinks the badge gives them immunity. The message is simple. You are not above the law. You will be held accountable. And if you abuse your power, you will pay the price." Judge Hernandez listened carefully, taking notes. When Samuel finished, she looked at Miller. "Mr. Miller, do you have anything to say before I impose sentence?" Miller stood slowly. For a moment, Samuel thought he'd refuse to speak. Then he turned and looked directly at Samuel. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't undo the harm. But I am sorry. I was wrong. I was racist. I was corrupt. I was everything you said I was, and I have to live with that for the rest of my life." His voice broke. "I convinced myself I was a good cop, that I was just being careful, that I was protecting the community, but I was lying to myself. The truth is I was scared of people who looked different from me, and I used my badge to control that fear, to hurt people who didn't deserve it. I can't take it back. I can only say I'm sorry, and hope that somewhere, somehow, that matters." Samuel felt nothing, no forgiveness, no satisfaction, just emptiness. The apology came too late and cost too little. Miller was sorry because he got caught, because he was facing prison. If Samuel hadn't been a Supreme Court justice, if Sarah hadn't recorded the video, if the FBI hadn't gotten involved, Miller would still be on the streets, terrorizing people. Judge Hernandez spoke without emotion. "Officer David Miller, you violated your oath, betrayed the public trust, and used your position of authority to harm innocent citizens. You targeted minorities, used excessive force, filed false reports, and participated in a conspiracy to obstruct justice. These are not minor mistakes. These are serious crimes that strike at the heart of our justice system. This court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison on the civil rights violations, 10 years on the assault charges, 5 years on the false reports, and 10 years on the conspiracy charges. Sentences to run consecutively. Total of 40 years in federal prison, eligible for parole after serving 32 years. You are remanded to custody immediately." 40 years. Miller would be 78 years old before he could even apply for parole. He'd spend what remained of his life behind bars. Samuel felt that emptiness again. Was this justice? Yes. But it felt hollow somehow. Like they'd won the battle, but the war raged on. The media frenzy that followed was intense. Every outlet wanted Samuel's reaction. He gave them the same statement. Justice was served today. Officer Miller will be held accountable for his crimes. But this is just one case. We need systemic reform to ensure this never happens again. 3 days after Miller's sentencing came Brody's trial. He'd already pled guilty as part of his cooperation agreement, so the proceeding was just sentencing. The judge gave him 12 years, eligible for parole after 9. Samuel attended but didn't give a victim impact statement. He'd said everything he needed to say at Miller's sentencing. The trials of the other corrupt officers proceeded over the next 6 months. All were convicted. All received significant prison time. The Westbrook Police Department was effectively dismantled and rebuilt from scratch. The mayor appointed a new chief, a black woman named Angela Morrison, no relation to the FBI agent who'd built a reputation for reform in another city. She fired 30 officers, instituted mandatory body cameras, created an independent oversight board, and began the long process of rebuilding community trust. Samuel threw himself into judicial reform. He wrote opinions strengthening protections against police misconduct. He spoke at conferences about systemic racism in the justice system. He testified before the state legislature in support of police reform bills, and he continued hearing cases applying the law with new understanding of how easily it could be twisted by those with power. 8 months after the arrest, Sarah Martinez's series on the case won the Pulitzer Prize for investigative journalism. She called Samuel crying with joy and disbelief. "I never thought, I hoped, but this is because of you, because you trusted me with your story. This is because you had the courage to record what you saw and the integrity to report it honestly. You earned this, Sarah. Congratulations." The Judicial Oversight Board closed its investigation into Samuel without finding any ethical violations. The governor issued a grudging statement acknowledging that Samuel had acted appropriately. Conservative critics quieted down as public opinion solidified behind reform. Samuel's approval ratings among voters reached 83%. But he didn't care about approval ratings or public opinion. He cared about the calls he got from people who'd been inspired by his story. A young black lawyer who'd been scared to report police abuse in his own case but finally found the courage. A mother whose son was killed by police who felt empowered to demand answers. A retired cop who'd witnessed corruption and finally spoke up after staying silent for 30 years. Those calls mattered. Those were the real victories. 1 year after the arrest, Samuel stood in his driveway on a Saturday morning holding a cup of coffee. The Japanese maple tree Grace had planted behind the house had grown tall and healthy. The neighborhood was quiet. A few neighbors were out. Helen Murray waved from across the street, her guilt apparently overcome. Robert Chen stopped his morning run to shake Samuel's hand and apologize for driving away that day. Grace joined him with her own coffee. They stood together watching the sun rise, feeling the peace that came from having fought and won. "You okay?" she asked. Samuel thought about it. Was he okay? The nightmares had mostly stopped. The hypervigilance had faded. His shoulder had healed. He could drive past police cars without his heart racing. Physically, mostly recovered. Emotionally getting there. "I'm okay," he said. "Better than okay. We changed things, Grace. Not everything, not enough, but something, and that has to count." "It counts. You made sure it counted." His phone rang. It was Agent Morrison Angela, the new police chief. "Justice Thorne, sorry to bother you on a Saturday, but I wanted you to hear this first. Moretti's testimony just helped us take down a corrupt district attorney in Capital City. We've got evidence of bribery, obstruction, conspiracy. The whole thing. He's been dismissing cases for Moretti's organization for 5 years. We're making the arrest this afternoon." Samuel closed his eyes and breathed. More corruption uncovered, more justice served, more proof that speaking up had mattered. "Thank you for letting me know, Chief Morrison. Keep fighting the good fight." "You too, Justice Thorne. You too." He hung up and looked at Grace. "They got another one. Corrupt DA in Capital City. How many does that make for ye? 32. 32 corrupt officials arrested because we refused to stay quiet." Grace squeezed his hand. "You did that. You and the other victims and Sarah and everyone who stood up. You proved that the system can work when people demand it work." Samuel pulled her close. In the distance he heard children laughing in the park. Heard cars driving past their occupants going about their Saturday morning routines. Heard life continuing normal and peaceful in the neighborhood where a year ago he'd feared for his life. His sons visited that weekend. Marcus brought his girlfriend, who he'd been dating for 6 months. David brought his new puppy, a golden retriever named Justice, as a tribute to his father. They barbecued in the backyard. They laughed. They told stories. They didn't talk about the trial or the case or any of it. They were just a family enjoying a weekend together. Sunday evening, as his sons prepared to leave, Marcus pulled Samuel aside. "Dad, I've been thinking about changing my focus in law school. I want to specialize in civil rights law, police misconduct cases specifically. What you did, what you're still doing, it inspired me. I want to fight those fights too." Samuel felt his throat tighten. This was the legacy he wanted. Not fame or recognition, but the next generation continuing the work. "You'll be brilliant at it. But Marcus, it's hard, it's exhausting, it's frustrating. You'll lose cases you should win. You'll see injustice you can't fix. Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Because if I don't fight, who will?" "You taught me that, Dad. You taught me that standing up matters even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." David joined them. "I'm thinking about specializing in forensic pathology, analyzing medical evidence in police brutality cases, using science to prove what happened when the official reports lie. Is that crazy?" Samuel looked at his sons, these young men he and Grace had raised who'd watched their father nearly die, and decided the answer was to fight harder, and felt overwhelming pride. "It's not crazy. It's exactly right. Both of you. You're going to change the world." "We learned from the best," Marcus said. That night, lying in bed, Samuel reflected on everything that had happened. A year ago, he'd been arrested in his own driveway. Today, he was a symbol of resistance, a champion of reform, proof that one person speaking up could catalyze change. The journey had been brutal, terrifying, exhausting, but worth it. His phone buzzed with a final message for the day. It was from Anthony Marshall. "Justice Thorne, I just got offered a job as a community liaison for the new police department. Chief Morrison wants someone who understands both sides. Someone who's experienced abuse but still believes reform is possible. I think I'm going to take it. Thank you for showing me that fighting back works." Samuel typed a response. "You're going to be amazing. Congratulations." Another victim finding purpose from pain. Another life rebuilt. Another small victory in the larger war for justice. Grace stirred beside him. "Can't sleep. Just thinking about everything, about how close I came to dying, about how lucky I am that Sarah recorded what happened, about how easily this could have gone differently. But it didn't. You survived. You fought. You won. That's what matters." Samuel turned to face her in the darkness. "Do you think it's really over?" "The case, yes. The fight, never. There will always be more corruption to expose more injustice, to challenge more people who need someone to stand up for them. But that's okay, because now we know we can win. Now we know the system can work if we force it to." She was right. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The beginning of Samuel's transformation from judge to advocate. The beginning of real reform in law enforcement. The beginning of a movement that would spread far beyond one case, one city, one state. He thought about Miller serving 40 years in federal prison, about Brody testifying against his former allies, about Moretti's criminal empire crumbling, about 32 corrupt officials arrested and charged, about new laws passed and old practices reformed, about body cameras and oversight boards and community policing initiatives spreading across the country. One Saturday morning, one racist cop, one man who refused to stay quiet. That's all it took to set everything in motion. Samuel closed his eyes and finally allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not naive hope that everything would be perfect, but realistic hope that things could get better. That change was possible. That justice, however imperfect, was worth fighting for. Monday morning came too soon. Samuel drove to the courthouse and walked through the front doors in his judicial robes. His colleagues greeted him. His clerks brought him case files. The work continued as it always had. But Samuel approached it differently now. Every case involving police testimony received extra scrutiny. Every defendant claiming abuse got a fair hearing. Every prosecutor had to prove their case beyond reasonable doubt without relying on the kind of corner-cutting that Miller had perfected. The first case on his docket was an appeal from a young Latino man convicted of drug possession. The arresting officer's testimony seemed questionable. The search warrant was thin. Samuel read the transcript 3 times, looking for the inconsistencies he now knew to watch for. And he found them. Lots of them. He scheduled oral arguments for the following week. He'd hear from both sides. He'd examine the evidence carefully, and if the conviction was obtained through misconduct, he'd overturn it, because that was his job now, not just applying the law, but ensuring the law applied fairly to everyone. His phone rang. It was Catherine Liu from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Justice Thorne wanted to give you an update. We just arrested the corrupt DA in Capital City. He's being arraigned this afternoon. Also, 3 more officers from Westbrook's neighboring county turned themselves in and are cooperating. The investigation is still producing results. Good. Keep me posted. Samuel hung up and returned to his work. Outside his window, the city continued its daily rhythm. People going to work, kids going to school, life happening in all its messy, complicated glory. And somewhere in that city, someone was probably experiencing the same injustice he'd experienced. Being profiled, being harassed, being brutalized by someone who was supposed to protect them. But now that person had options. They could call Sarah Martinez, who'd become a clearinghouse for police misconduct complaints. They could contact Attorney Chen, who'd started a nonprofit providing free legal services to victims. They could reach out to the new police oversight board that actually investigated complaints. They could look at Samuel's example and know that speaking up was possible. That was the real victory. Not the convictions or the sentences or the reforms, though those mattered. The real victory was giving people hope that the system could work, that justice was possible, that speaking up could lead to change. Samuel picked up his pen and began writing his opinion on the drug possession case. He wrote with precision and passion, citing precedent and principle, building an argument that would protect defendants' rights while respecting law enforcement's legitimate role. It was a delicate balance, but Samuel had learned over the past year that justice was always a balance between security and freedom, between order and rights, between punishment and redemption. He worked through lunch, through afternoon meetings, through the usual distractions. At 5 p.m., his clerk knocked. "Justice Thorne, there's someone here to see you. She says it's important." A woman Samuel didn't recognize entered his office. She was in her 30s, black, wearing scrubs like she'd just gotten off a hospital shift. Her eyes were red from crying. "Justice Thorne, I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Keisha Williams. I'm a nurse, and 3 days ago my brother was killed by police during a traffic stop." Samuel's heart sank. Another victim, another family destroyed. The fight wasn't over. It would never be over. "I'm so sorry for your loss. How can I help you?" "They're saying he reached for a weapon, that the shooting was justified, but my brother didn't own a gun. He was a teacher. He coached Little League. He wouldn't..." Her voice broke. "I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fight this, but I saw what you did. I saw how you refused to let them cover it up, and I thought maybe you could help me. Maybe you could tell me how to get justice for my brother." Samuel stood and guided her to a chair. He grabbed tissues from his desk. He listened as she told her story, the same story he'd heard too many times. A routine traffic stop, escalation, gunshots, a family destroyed. An official report that justified everything. "Ms. Williams, I'm going to help you. I'm going to connect you with attorneys who specialize in these cases. I'm going to make sure the FBI investigates. I'm going to ensure your brother's story gets told. But I need you to be strong. This fight is hard. It's long. It's painful. The system will try to break you. Are you ready for that?" She wiped her eyes and looked at him with determination that reminded him of Grace. "My brother is dead. They killed him and they're trying to cover it up. I don't have a choice. I have to fight. For him, for my family, for everyone else who might be next." Samuel pulled out his phone and started making calls. To Agent Morrison, to Attorney Chen, to Sarah Martinez, to everyone in his network who could help this woman get justice for her brother. Because this was what the fight looked like now. Not dramatic trials or headline-grabbing convictions. Just one person at a time, one case at a time, one victim at a time, slowly, painfully, persistently pushing the system toward justice. As the sun set over the city and his office grew dark except for the desk lamp, Samuel continued working, making calls, writing emails, building another case, fighting another battle in a war that would never truly end. But he wasn't tired anymore, wasn't scared anymore, wasn't alone anymore. He had Grace and his sons. He had the 17 victims who'd become his allies. He had good cops like Brooks and Angela Morrison who were working for change from inside. He had journalists like Sarah who told the truth. He had prosecutors like Catherine Liu who pursued justice relentlessly. He had people like Keisha Williams who refused to give up despite impossible odds. Together they were stronger than any corrupt system. Together they could create change. Together they were proving that justice, however delayed or imperfect, was possible. Samuel looked at the framed photo on his desk, him and Grace on their wedding day 25 years ago, young and hopeful and convinced they could change the world. Maybe they couldn't change the whole world, but they could change their corner of it. One case at a time, one victim at a time, one act of courage at a time. That would have to be enough, and somehow, miraculously, it was.